Step into the mind of Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective who sees what others miss. In a world of secrets, he unravels lies with razor-sharp eyes, catching every glance, pause, and hidden motive. From bustling London markets to grand mansions, Poirot weaves together clues, twitching hands, silent fears, and whispered words, to solve a web of deception that could ruin lives. Can you spot the truth in the chaos? Discover his secrets in this thrilling tale of wit and lies. Chapter 1. The Art of Observation. Hercule Poirot sat in his favorite armchair, the one with the soft green cushion that hugged his back just right. His small, neat mustache twitched as he sipped his tisane, a warm herbal drink that smelled of mint and calm. The room was quiet except for the tick-tock of the old clock on the mantel. Outside, London streets buzzed with life. Car horns, footsteps, the chatter of people rushing home. But inside, Poirot's world was still, sharp, and focused. His eyes, bright and quick like a bird's, darted to the window. He wasn't looking at anything special, not yet. He was practicing, watching, seeing. To Poirot, seeing was more than looking. It was a skill, a gift, a weapon. He believed that the truth hid in plain sight, waiting for someone clever enough to notice it. Most people, he thought, walked through life half blind. They saw what they expected to see, not what was really there. Poirot was different. He saw everything. The way a man's fingers tapped nervously on a table, the way a woman's smile didn't reach her eyes, the way a coat hung just a bit too heavy on one side. These were clues, tiny sparks that lit the path to truth. And Poirot, the great detective, had spent years learning how to catch those sparks. This chapter isn't just about Poirot solving a case, though we'll get to one soon. It's about his secret weapon, observation. It's about how he trained his eyes and mind to notice what others missed. It's about how you too can learn to see like Poirot. Because, as he often said, the truth is there, mon ami, if only you look for it. The man who saw too much Poirot wasn't born with magic eyes. He wasn't born knowing how to spot a lie. He learned it, piece by piece, case by case. As a young policeman in Belgium, he watched people, shopkeepers, bakers, thieves, lovers. He noticed how they moved, how they spoke, how they tried to hide things. Once he caught a pickpocket not because the man ran, but because he stood too still, his hand lingering near a lady's purse. That was the first lesson. The guilty, often, try too hard to look innocent. Years later in London, Poirot's habit of watching grew sharper. He'd sit in cafes not to eat but to study. A man stirring his coffee too fast might be nervous. A woman glancing at her watch every minute might be waiting for someone she didn't want to meet. These weren't guesses. They were facts, small truths that added up to bigger ones. Poirot called it the art of observation. It wasn't just looking at things, it was understanding what they meant. Let's start with a story. Not a big one, not yet, but a small one that shows how Poirot's eyes worked. It happened in a quiet little tea shop on a rainy Tuesday. Poirot was there, tucked into a corner, his hat neatly on the table, his cane leaning against his chair. The shop was cozy with pink tablecloths and the smell of fresh scones. People came and went, their umbrellas dripping, their voices soft and tired. Poirot sipped his tea and watched. At a table nearby, a young man sat with a woman. They were talking, or at least she was. The woman, with curly brown hair and a bright red scarf, laughed and waved her hands as she spoke. The man, thin and pale, nodded, but his eyes kept sliding to the door. Poirot noticed. Most people wouldn't. Most people would see a couple chatting, maybe a date, maybe old friends. But Poirot saw more. The man's fingers gripped his teacup, too tightly. His shoulders were stiff, like he was ready to jump up and run. When the woman laughed, he smiled, but it was a quick, tight smile, gone in a flash. And his eyes. Those eyes kept flicking to the door, then to his watch, then back to the door. Poirot's mind clicked like a machine. Nervous. Expecting someone. Or something. Poirot didn't move. He didn't need to. He just watched. The woman didn't seem to notice her companion's unease. She kept talking, her voice bubbly, her hands dancing. But then, something changed. The door opened and a man walked in, tall, with a gray coat and a face like a storm cloud. The young man at the table froze. His teacup clinked against the saucer. The woman stopped talking, her brow wrinkling. "What's wrong?" she asked. Poirot leaned forward just a little. The tall man in the gray coat scanned the room, his eyes locking onto the young man. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the young man stood, mumbled something about needing air, and hurried out, brushing past the tall man without a word. The woman sat there, confused, her red scarf bright against the dull room. The tall man hesitated, then left too. To anyone else it was nothing, a strange moment quickly forgotten. But to Poirot it was a puzzle. Why was the young man so nervous? Who was the man in the gray coat? Why did the young man leave so fast? Poirot didn't know the answers, not yet. But he knew one thing. Something was wrong. And it all started with what he saw. Learning to see, Poirot believed anyone could learn to see like him if they tried. It wasn't about having special eyes or a big brain. It was about paying attention. Most people, he said, let their minds wander. They think about lunch, or work, or what to say next. They miss the world around them. Poirot didn't. He trained his mind to stay sharp, to notice everything, even the boring stuff. Here's how he did it. First, he looked at the big picture. In the tea shop, he didn't just stare at the young man. He saw the whole room, the tables, the waiters, the way the light fell through the window. This gave him context, a map to fit the clues into. Then he zoomed in on the details. The man's tight grip, the quick glances, the fake smile. Finally, he asked himself, what does this mean? Why is this person acting this way? It was like solving a math problem, but instead of numbers, he used people. Let's try it. Imagine you're in a park. You see a woman sitting on a bench reading a book. Easy, right? She's just reading. But look closer. Her book is upside down. Her foot is tapping fast like she's nervous. She keeps looking up, not at the trees or the birds, but at a path leading out of the park. What's going on? Is she waiting for someone? Is she scared? Is she pretending to read to blend in? These questions are the start of seeing like Poirot. Poirot had rules for this. He didn't just make them up. They came from years of watching people lie, cheat, and hide. Here are some of his tricks. Look at the hands. Hands tell stories. A person might smile and act calm, but if their hands are shaking or clenched, they're hiding something. In the tea shop, the young man's grip on his teacup was a clue. It showed he was tense even if his face didn't. Watch the eyes. Eyes are hard to control. People can fake a laugh or a frown, but their eyes often give them away. The young man's eyes kept jumping to the door. That meant he was expecting trouble or someone. Notice what's missing. Sometimes what people don't do is as important as what they do. The young man didn't laugh with the woman. He didn't relax. He didn't act like someone enjoying a chat. That was a clue. Pay attention to timing. The young man froze when the tall man walked in. That moment, that sudden change was a signal. Something connected the two men even if they didn't speak. Don't guess too soon. Poirot never jumped to conclusions. He collected clues like pieces of a puzzle, waiting until he had enough to see the whole picture. The young man might be a criminal, or he might be scared of one. Poirot didn't know yet, but he'd find out. The case of the nervous man. Let's go back to the tea shop. Poirot didn't just watch and walk away. He was curious, and curiosity was his fuel. He paid his bill, tipped his hat to the waitress, and stepped into the rain. The young man was gone, but the tall man in the gray coat was just down the street, standing under a lamppost lighting a cigarette. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The tall man wasn't walking away. He was waiting. Poirot didn't follow him. Not yet. Instead, he went back to his apartment and made a few calls. He had friends, contacts, people who owed him favors. Within an hour, he knew a little more. The young man was named Thomas Reed, a a clerk at a bank. The woman was his sister, Clara. The tall man? Nobody knew him, but he'd been seen near the bank where Thomas worked. Interesting. The next day, Poirot visited the bank. He didn't barge in or ask big questions. He pretended to be a customer, fussing about his account, watching everyone. Thomas was there, behind a counter, his face pale, his hands shaky. Poirot noticed a new clue. Thomas kept glancing at a locked drawer under his desk. Why? What was in there? Poirot didn't need to break in. He just watched. At noon, Thomas left for lunch, but he didn't go to a cafe. He went to a quiet alley where the tall man was waiting. Poirot, hidden behind a corner, saw them argue. Thomas handed over a small envelope. The tall man looked inside, nodded, and walked away. Thomas's shoulders slumped, like a weight had lifted or fallen. Back at his apartment, Poirot thought it over. The clues were piling up. Thomas's nervousness, the envelope, the tall man, the locked drawer. Something was wrong at the bank. Maybe Thomas was stealing. Maybe he was being blackmailed. Poirot didn't know yet, but he knew how to find out. Keep watching. Over the next few days, Poirot became a regular at the bank. He noticed more. Thomas was jumpy, but he was good at his job. Too good. His ledgers were perfect, but one day, Poirot saw him slip a piece of paper into his pocket. It wasn't a bank form. It was handwritten. Another clue. Poirot also watched the tall man. His name, he learned, was Victor Crane. He wasn't a criminal, not officially, but he had a reputation for fixing problems. Poirot's mind clicked. Again, blackmail. It fit. Victor was pressuring Thomas, and the envelope probably had money or something worse. Teaching the art, Poirot didn't just solve cases. He taught others to see like him. His friend Captain Hastings was always eager to learn, though he wasn't very good at it. One evening, over dinner, Poirot explained his method. Hastings, "Mon ami," he said, "you look, but you do not see. Tell me, what did you notice about the waiter tonight?" Hastings blinked. He was tall, brown hair, brought our food. Poirot sighed. "And did you see his hands?" "They were stained with ink." "Did you see his shoes?" "One was scuffed, the other polished." "Did you see how he avoided the table by the window?" "These are clues, Hastings. They tell a story." Hastings frowned. "What story?" Poirot smiled. "Perhaps he writes letters in secret. Perhaps he is clumsy with one foot. Perhaps he fears someone at that table. I do not know yet, but I see. And seeing is the first step." Hastings tried. He really did. The next day, he watched a man on the train. "He was reading a newspaper," Hastings said. "He coughed a lot." Poirot nodded. "Good. Now what kind of cough? Was it dry? Wet? Did he cover his mouth? Was the newspaper open to a certain page?" Hastings groaned. "I didn't look that close." "Exactly," Poirot said. "But you can learn. Start small. Watch one person. Notice 3 things about them. Then 5. Then 10. Soon you will see like Poirot." The truth revealed back to Thomas and Victor. Poirot didn't need long to crack the case. He watched, he waited, and he acted. One morning, he visited the bank manager, a fat man with a loud voice. Poirot didn't accuse anyone, he just asked questions, simple ones like how the bank checked its books. The manager bragged about their system, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught a flicker of worry. That night, Poirot invited Thomas to his apartment. He didn't threaten or shout. He just talked, calm and smooth, like a friend. "Monsieur Reed," he said, "you are in trouble. I see it in your hands, your eyes. Tell me about Victor Crane." Thomas broke down. It was blackmail. Victor had proof that Thomas had fudged some numbers, not to steal, but to cover a mistake. Victor demanded money, or he'd tell the manager. Thomas, scared and trapped, paid. Poirot didn't judge. He solved. He told Thomas to trust him, then set a trap. The next time Victor came for money, Poirot was there, with a policeman hiding nearby. Victor was caught, the envelope opened. It had bank papers, proof of Thomas's mistake. The manager was angry, but Poirot convinced him to give Thomas a second chance. The truth was out, and it started with Poirot's eyes. The lesson: observation isn't magic. It's work. It's looking when others don't. It's noticing the small things, hands, eyes, timing, and asking what they mean. Poirot's secret wasn't a trick or a gadget. It was his mind, trained to see the world clearly. Try it. Next time you're in a room, pick one person. Watch them for a minute. Notice their hands, their eyes, their movements. What's normal? What's odd? What story are they telling without words? That's the art of observation. That's how Poirot unraveled lies. Chapter 2. The Power of the Little Gray Cells. Hercule Poirot sat at his desk, a small polished table that gleamed under the soft glow of a lamp. His hands, neat and precise, rested on a notebook. No pen, no paper, just his fingers, still as stone. His eyes, sharp as ever, stared at nothing, at least nothing anyone else could see. To an outsider, he looked like a man daydreaming. But Poirot wasn't dreaming. His mind, his little gray cells as he called them, buzzed like a hive of bees. He was thinking, piecing together a puzzle no one else knew existed. The little gray cells were Poirot's greatest tool. Not his eyes, though they saw everything. Not his ears, though they caught every whisper. His brain, those tiny invisible cells, turned clues into answers. They sorted the truth from the lies. Most people, Poirot thought, didn't use their minds enough. They saw a clue and jumped to a guess. Not Poirot. He let his gray cells work, slow and careful, like a chef stirring a perfect sauce. This chapter is about that process, how Poirot used his mind to unravel lies and how you can too. The mind at work, Poirot often said, the truth is in the details, but the answer is in the mind. Seeing was only the first step. You could notice a man's shaky hands or a woman's quick glance, but what did it mean? That's where the gray cells came in. They took the clues, turned them over, and found the story hidden inside. As a boy in Belgium, Poirot wasn't always so clever. He was curious, yes, but his mind wandered. He'd see a man steal an apple and think, thief, without asking. Why? Was the man hungry? Was it a dare? Was the apple even stolen, or did it fall from a cart? Young Poirot learned the hard way. Guessing too fast led to mistakes. So he trained his mind to slow down, to think, to question. Now in London, his gray cells were like a machine. Picture a room full of gears, clicking and turning, each one fitting perfectly with the next. That was Poirot's brain. He didn't just see a clue and stop. He asked, why is this here? What does it connect to? What's missing? And most important, what's the lie? Let's dive into a story to show how it worked. It was a chilly morning, and Poirot was walking through a busy market street. Stalls lined the road, selling fish, flowers, and bread that smelled warm and fresh. People shouted, laughed, and haggled. Poirot, in his neat coat and polished shoes, looked out of place, but his eyes were alive, scanning the crowd. At one stall, a woman sold apples, her hands quick as she handed them to customers. A boy, maybe 16, stood nearby, his cap pulled low. He wasn't buying anything. He just watched, his fingers twitching in his pockets. Poirot noticed. Most wouldn't. To them, it was just a boy in a market. But Poirot's gray cells started turning. The boy's eyes flicked to the woman's money box, a tin tucked under the stall. His feet shifted like he was ready to move fast. Poirot didn't stare. He bought an apple, smiled at the woman, and kept watching from the corner of his eye. The boy lingered, then walked away. But Poirot's mind didn't stop. Why was the boy there? Was he planning to steal? Was he waiting for someone? Or was he just a kid with nowhere to go? The puzzle of the market. Poirot didn't follow the boy, not yet. He went home, sat in his armchair, and closed his eyes. This was when his gray cells worked hardest. He pictured the market, the woman's quick hands, the boy's twitchy fingers. The tin box. Then he asked questions. Why was the boy nervous? Why didn't he buy anything? Why did he keep looking at the money box? Poirot's mind worked like a map. Each clue was a dot, and his gray cells drew lines between them. The boy's cap, pulled low, could hide his face. His twitchy fingers suggested nerves, maybe guilt. But the market was busy. Why pick that stall? Poirot thought harder. The woman had a routine. She turned to grab apples, leaving the money box unguarded for a moment. The boy knew that. How? Poirot didn't guess. He let the clues talk. The next day, he went back to the market. The woman was there, same as before, but the boy wasn't. Poirot bought another apple and chatted. Busy day? He asked, his voice smooth and friendly. Oh, always, the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron. But I'm careful. Last week someone tried to nick my tin. Poirot's ears perked up, but his face stayed calm. A thief? How bold. A boy, she said. Didn't get nothing, though. I scared him off. Poirot nodded, but his gray cells spun. The Esrap, boy from yesterday, was it the same one? He asked more questions, gentle ones, and learned the boy had been around before, always watching, never buying. The woman thought he was just a pest. Poirot thought differently. The method of the mind Poirot's gray cells followed rules. He didn't. Just think wildly. He had a system built from years of solving cases. Here's how it worked. Collect the clues. Poirot never started with answers. He started with facts. What he saw, what he heard. The boy's cap, his twitchy fingers, the money box, no guessing yet, ask why. Every clue had a reason. Why was the boy nervous? Why was he at that stall? Poirot asked questions to dig deeper. Look for patterns. One clue was just a clue. 2 or 3 made a story. The boy's behavior matched the woman's story of a thief. That was a pattern. Test the story. Poirot didn't believe his first idea. He tested it. If the boy was a thief, why didn't he steal yesterday? Was he planning something bigger? Wait for the spark. Sometimes the gray cells needed time. Poirot would sit, sip his tisane, and let his mind wander. The answer would come like a light switching on. This wasn't magic. It was work. Poirot's mind was sharp because he practiced, like a musician playing scales. He trained himself to think clearly, to avoid rushing, to let the truth show itself. The boy and the plan Poirot went back to the market every day watching. The boy returned always at the same time, just before noon. Poirot noticed more. The boy wasn't alone. Another boy, older, stood across the street, pretending to read a newspaper. They never spoke, but their eyes met, quick and secret. Poirot's gray cells clicked. A team. Poirot didn't act yet. He thought. The younger boy was the distraction, he decided. He'd make a fuss, maybe knock over apples, while the older one grabbed the money box. It was a simple plan, but clever. The market was loud, busy. Nobody would notice, but Poirot did. His gray cells put the pieces together. The younger boy's nerves, the older boy's calm, the woman's routine. It wasn't just a theft. It was a plan, practiced and timed. Poirot could stop them, but he wanted to know more. Why steal from her? Was it just money or something else? He visited the market again, this time talking to other vendors. They knew the boys not by name, but by sight. Troublemakers, one man said. Always hanging around, never buying. Another vendor mentioned a third boy, bigger, who sometimes watched from a distance. Poirot's mind lit up. A bigger plan. Teaching Hastings. That evening, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a glass of wine. Hastings, as usual, was amazed but confused. How do you know all this, Poirot? You didn't see them steal. Poirot smiled. My gray cells, Hastings. They see what my eyes cannot. I watch, I think, I connect. You must try it. Hastings laughed. I'd need a new brain for that. No, Poirot said, serious. You need to use the one you have. Start with one clue. Ask why it's there. Then find another. Soon you will see the picture. Hastings tried. He told Poirot about a man he'd seen at the train station, carrying a heavy bag. He kept looking back like someone was following him. Poirot nodded. Good, now why? Was the bag stolen? Was he scared? Did he look at anyone specific? Hastings groaned. I didn't think to check. Exactly, Poirot said. But you can learn. Watch, think, question, let your gray cells work. The truth unraveled. Poirot didn't let the boys steal. He went to the market one last time, but this time he brought a policeman, a quiet man who blended into the crowd. Poirot watched as the younger boy started his act, tripping near the stall, knocking apples to the ground. The woman shouted, bending to pick them up. The older boy moved in, his hand reaching for the tin. Stop, Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. The boys froze. The policeman stepped forward, and the crowd turned to look. The younger boy tried to run, but Poirot's cane tapped his leg, not hard, just enough to make him stop. No need to run, mon ami, Poirot said. Let us talk. The boys confessed. They weren't just thieves. They were part of a gang, led by the third boy, the big one. He forced them to steal, taking most of the money. The woman's stall was just one target. Poirot's gray cells had seen it all. The plan, the team, the bigger picture. The policeman took the boys away, but Poirot made sure they weren't punished too harshly. They were young, scared, trapped by someone meaner. The woman got her money box back and she thanked Poirot with a basket of apples. He smiled, but his mind was already moving to the next puzzle. The lesson. The little gray cells are your power. You don't need fancy tools or big words. You need to think, clearly, slowly, carefully. Notice the clues. Ask why they're there. Look for patterns. Test your ideas. And wait for the truth to show itself. Try it. Next time you see something odd, a nervous glance, a quick word, don't guess. Think. What does it mean? What's the story? That's how Poirot's gray cells worked. That's how he unraveled lies. Chapter 3. Listening Beyond Words. Hercule Poirot leaned back in a wooden chair at a small cafe, the kind with wobbly tables and the smell of fresh bread. His hands folded neatly over his cane, and his mustache was as perfect as ever. The cafe was alive with noise, clinking cups, laughter, the hum of voices. To most it was just chatter, a blur of words. But to Poirot it was a symphony. Every voice, every pause, every change in tone was a clue. He wasn't just hearing words. He was listening, really listening, for the truth hidden behind them. Poirot believed that people lied with more than their words. They lied with their voices, their hesitations, the way they rushed or slowed down. Words could be rehearsed, but the voice? That was harder to control. A tremble, a too quick laugh, a sudden silence. These were the cracks where lies leaked out. This chapter is about Poirot's art of listening, how he used his ears like a detective's magnifying glass to uncover what people tried to hide. The ear, as a detective, Poirot's ears were as sharp as his eyes. As a young man in Belgium, he learned that listening was more than hearing words. He worked as a policeman, questioning suspects, and noticed something. The guilty ones often said the right things, but their voices gave them away. A man swearing he was innocent might stutter on a keyword. A woman hiding a secret might talk too fast, like she was running from the truth. Poirot started paying attention, not just to what people said, but how they said it. Now, in London, his ears were his secret weapon. He could sit in a room, sip his tisane, and hear things others missed. A waiter's cheerful, "Good evening," might carry a hint of strain. A friend's casual, "I'm fine," might waver just for a second. These were signals, tiny ripples in the voice that pointed to something deeper. Poirot called it listening beyond words. It was about catching the music of speech, the rhythm, the tone, the silences, and finding the lies buried inside. Let's see it in action. One evening, Poirot was at a dinner party in a grand house, all chandeliers and polished silver. The guests were fancy. Ladies in sparkly dresses, men in crisp suits, all talking about money and travel. Poirot, small and quiet, sat at the edge of the table, his eyes polite but his ears wide open. He wasn't there to eat or chat. He was there to listen. At the head of the table sat Mr. Harold Grayson, a businessman with a loud laugh and a red face. He was telling a story about a deal he'd made, something about buying a factory. Everyone nodded, smiled, clapped. But Poirot's ears caught something odd. Grayson's voice was bold, but when he mentioned the factory's price, $10,000, it dipped, just a fraction, like he was swallowing a word. Then he rushed on, talking louder, as if to cover it up. Most people wouldn't notice. They were too busy with their wine and roast beef. But Poirot did. Across the table, Grayson's wife, Mrs. Eleanor Grayson, was quieter. She smiled when her husband spoke, but her "oh yes" answers were short, clipped, like she didn't want to say more. When someone asked about the factory, she laughed, a high, sharp sound that stopped too fast. Poirot's ears prickled. Something was wrong. The Graysons were hiding something, and their voices were shouting it, even if their words didn't. Clues in the voice. Poirot didn't just listen to what people said. He listened to how they said it. Voices, he thought, were like fingerprints, unique, hard to fake. A lie could hide in a sentence, but the voice often betrayed it. Here's how. He did it. Tone. A voice could be warm, cold, shaky, or flat. A man saying, "I love my job," in a dull tone was probably lying. Mrs. Grayson's sharp laugh didn't match her smile. It sounded forced, like she was acting. Pauses. People paused when they were nervous or thinking too hard. Mr. Grayson's voice dipped when he said $10,000, like he was hesitating, unsure if the number sounded right. Speed. Liars often talked fast to rush past a lie or slow to think one up. Grayson sped up after mentioning the price as if he wanted to move on quick. Silences. What people didn't say was as loud as what they did. Mrs. Grayson's short answers, her refusal to talk about the factory, screamed that she was hiding something. Changes. A voice that switched from calm to loud or happy to flat was a red flag. Grayson's loud story and sudden dip in tone were like a crack in a wall, small, but enough to see through. Poirot didn't guess. He listened, then let his little gray cells sort it out. The Graysons' voices told him they were nervous about the factory deal. Why? That was the question. The dinner party puzzle. Poirot didn't confront the Graysons at the table. He never made a scene unless he had to. Instead, he listened more. Later, as guests mingled over coffee, he moved closer to Mr. Grayson, who was talking to a banker. "The factory's a gold mine," Grayson said, his voice booming. But when the banker asked, "Who sold it to you?" Grayson coughed, mumbled a name, Mr. Thompson, and changed the subject. The cough, the mumble, the quick switch. Poirot's ears caught it all. Mrs. Grayson was harder to read. She stayed quiet, sipping her coffee, her eyes on her husband. But when a guest asked if she'd visited the factory, her voice went high. "Oh no, not yet," she said, then laughed that sharp laugh again. Poirot noticed her fingers tighten on her cup. Her voice and hands were saying what her words didn't. She was scared. Poirot slipped away from the party early, his mind buzzing. The Graysons were lying about the factory deal. Maybe the price was wrong. Maybe the factory wasn't theirs. Maybe this Mr. Thompson didn't exist. Poirot's ears had given him the clues. Now his gray cells would find the truth. The investigation begins. The next day, Poirot made calls. He had friends everywhere. Clerks, reporters, even a nosy old lady who knew everyone's business. He asked about Harold Grayson and the factory. The answers were fuzzy. The factory existed, but nobody knew about a sale. The name Thompson didn't turn up anywhere. Poirot wasn't surprised. His ears had told him the truth was slippery. He visited Grayson's office, a big room with leather chairs and a view of the Thames. Grayson was all smiles, offering Poirot a cigar. "What brings you here, Mr. Poirot?" he asked, his voice loud but shaky at the edges. Poirot smiled back, polite as ever. Just curiosity, monsieur. I hear of your factory deal. Most impressive. He watched Grayson's face, but he listened harder. Grayson laughed, too loud, and said, "Yes, a great deal. All signed and done." But his voice cracked on done. Just a little, but enough. Poirot's ears caught it. He asked a few more questions, simple ones, and listened. Grayson's answers were long, full of big words, but his voice kept slipping, pausing, here, rushing there. He was lying and his voice couldn't hide it. Poirot didn't push. He thanked Grayson, left and went to work. He found a cafe near the factory and listened to the workers. They talked about low wages, broken machines, a boss who never showed up, no mention of a sale, no mention of Thompson. Poirot's ears were building a case, teaching Hastings to listen. That night, Poirot met Captain Hastings at a pub. Hastings, red-faced from a pint, was eager for a story. "What's this about a factory, Poirot? Did you solve it already?" Poirot sipped his wine. "Not yet, mon ami, but my ears, they hear much. Let me teach you." Hastings leaned in. "Teach me." "What?" "To listen," Poirot said. "Not to words, but to the voice." "Tell me, what did you hear today?" Hastings thought. "A man on the bus was yelling about his boss. Said he hated him." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "And how did he say it? Loud? Soft? Did he pause?" Hastings blinked. "Loud, I guess. He sounded angry." "Guess?" Poirot shook his head. "Do not guess. Listen. Was his voice steady? Did it shake? Did he stop to breathe?" Hastings groaned. "I didn't notice. It was just yelling." "Exactly," Poirot said, "but next time listen. Hear the cracks in the voice, they tell the story." The truth comes out. Poirot didn't need long. He went back to the Graysons' house, this time with a plan. He invited them to tea, just the three of them. Mrs. Grayson was nervous, her voice high and quick. Mr. Grayson was loud, but his laughs were forced. Poirot talked about nothing. Weather, tea, London fog, watching their faces, listening to their voices. Then he struck. "This factory deal," he said, casual as ever. "It is not real, is it?" Mrs. Grayson gasped, her cup clinking. "Mr." Grayson laughed, but it was a weak sound, like air leaking from a balloon. "Nonsense," he said, but his voice shook. Poirot didn't shout. He just spoke, soft and clear. "Your voice, monsieur. It betrays you. The pauses, the cracks, the rush to speak. And madam, your silences, they scream. They broke." Mr. Grayson admitted it. There was no deal. He'd made it up to impress investors, to borrow money he couldn't pay back. Mrs. Grayson knew, but kept quiet, scared of the shame. There was no Thompson, no sale, just a lie that grew too big. Poirot didn't call the police. He told Grayson to come clean, to fix the mess. The Graysons agreed, their voices soft now, honest for the first time. Poirot left them with a nod, his work done. The lesson listening beyond words is a skill. It's not about hearing the loudest voice or the fanciest story. It's about the tone, the pauses, the silences. Poirot's ears caught what others missed because he listened with purpose. He heard the truth in the cracks of a lie. Try it. Next time someone speaks, don't just hear the words. Listen to how they sound. Is their voice steady? Do they pause too long? Do they laugh when they shouldn't? That's where the lies hide. That's how Poirot unraveled them. Chapter 4. The Mask of Motive. Hercule Poirot stood by a window in his tidy London apartment, the morning light catching the shine of his polished shoes. His hands were clasped behind his back, his mustache perfectly trimmed, and his eyes, sharp as ever, gazed at the street below. People hurried along. Men in suits, women with shopping bags, a boy on a bicycle. To most, they were just a crowd. To Poirot, they were stories, each one driven by a reason, a purpose, a motive. And motives, he knew, were the key to unlocking lies. Poirot believed that nobody lied for no reason. Every lie had a purpose, like a seed buried in dirt, waiting to grow. A man might lie to hide a crime, A woman to protect someone she loved, a child to avoid a scolding. The words of the lie were just the surface, like a mask. To find the truth, Poirot had to peel back that mask and see the motive underneath. This chapter is about how he did it, how he sniffed out the why behind the lie, and how you can learn to do the same. The heart of the Lee Poirot learned early that lies weren't random. As a young policeman in Belgium, he questioned thieves, cheats, and even murderers. At first, he focused on their words, trying to catch them in a mistake. But soon he realized words were just the start. The real question was, why are they lying? A thief might say he was home all night. But why? To hide a theft? To protect a friend? To seem important? The motive was the map to the truth. In London, Poirot's skill grew sharper. He watched people everywhere, on trains and shops, at parties, and asked himself, what do they want? A man bragging about money might want respect. A woman hiding a letter might want to keep a secret. Motives weren't always bad. Sometimes people lied to be kind, to save face, or to avoid pain. But every lie had a reason, and Poirot's job was to find it. Let's see it in action. One foggy afternoon, Poirot was invited to a small bookshop for a reading. The shop was cozy, with shelves stuffed to the ceiling and the smell of old paper. A young author, Miss Clara Weston, stood at a podium reading from her new novel. Her voice was clear, her smile bright, but Poirot's eyes narrowed. Something was off. Clara was reading a story about a brave detective, but when she described a scene, a murder in an alley, her hands shook, just a little. She paused, sipped water, and went on, but her voice was tighter now. The crowd clapped, charmed by her words. Poirot wasn't. He saw the shake, heard the strain. Why was she nervous? Was it just stage fright or something more? After the reading, Clara signed books, laughing with fans. Poirot waited, watching. A man approached her, older, with a stiff suit and a sharp voice. "Fine story, Miss Weston," he said, but his tone was cold. Clara's smile froze and she mumbled, "Thank you, Mr. Lyle." Poirot's ears caught the waver in her voice. His eyes saw her fingers grip the pen too hard. The man, Mr. Lyle, walked away, but Clara's eyes followed him, wide and worried. Poirot's mind clicked. Clara was hiding something, and it had to do with Mr. Lyle. But what? And why? The lie was in her nervous hands, her shaky voice. The motive was the key. Finding the why, Poirot didn't just guess motives. He had a system built from years of watching people lie. He called it peeling the mask. Here's how it worked. Watch the behavior. Lies showed up in actions, not just words. Clara's shaky hands and tight voice were clues. They showed she was scared or hiding something. Ask, what do they gain? Every lie had a purpose. Did Clara want to impress someone, hide a mistake, protect herself? Poirot thought about what she might want. Look at the context. Who was around? What was happening? Mr. Lyle's cold tone and Clara's reaction pointed to a connection. Maybe he knew her secret? Test the lie. Poirot would ask questions, gentle ones, to see how people reacted. If they got nervous or changed their story, the motive was closer, to the surface. Think like them. Poirot put himself in the liar's shoes. If he were Clara, why would he lie? Fear? Shame? Money? This helped him guess the motive, then check if it fit. Let's try it. Imagine you're at school, and a friend says, "I didn't take your pencil." But their voice is too loud, their eyes don't meet yours. Why are they lying? Maybe they're scared of getting in trouble. Maybe they want to keep the pencil. Maybe they're covering for someone else. The motive tells you more than the words. The bookshop mystery. Poirot didn't confront Clara at the bookshop. He was too polite, too clever. Instead, he bought her book, smiled, and said, "A fine story, mademoiselle. Most intriguing." Clara blushed, her fingers twisting the pen. Poirot's words were soft, but his eyes watched her reaction. She was nervous, and it wasn't just the crowd. The next day, Poirot did some digging. He called a friend who knew the book world, a chatty librarian who loved gossip. She told him about Clara, young, talented, but struggling for money. Her book was selling well, but she owed debts. And Mr. Lyle? He was a publisher, a tough one, known for pushing writers to do what he wanted. Interesting. Poirot visited the bookshop again, this time to talk to the owner. He asked about Clara's reading, casual as ever. The owner shrugged. She's nice but jumpy. Kept asking if Lyle was coming. Poirot's gray cells clicked. Clara was scared of Lyle. Why? He went to Clara's reading the next week, this time at a library. She was smoother now, her voice steady. But when Lyle appeared in the crowd, her hands shook again. Poirot watched them both. Lyle stood at the back, arms crossed, his face hard. When Clara finished, he clapped, but his eyes were like knives. Clara saw him and stumbled over her last words. Poirot's mind worked fast. Clara's lie was in her book, or about her book. Lyle knew something, and it made her nervous. Was the story stolen? Was it based on something real? The motive was close, Poirot could feel it. Digging deeper, Poirot didn't need to shout or accuse. He invited Clara for tea, just the two of them, at a quiet cafe. She came, her smile tight, her hands fidgeting. Poirot was kind, talking about books, London, the weather. Then he said, "Your story, mademoiselle, it feels so real. Almost too real." Clara's cup clinked against the saucer. "It's just fiction," she said, but her voice was too quick, her eyes darting away. Poirot listened, watched, and asked gently, "This Mr. Lyle, he knows your work well, yes?" Clara froze. Her silence was louder than words. Poirot didn't push. He sipped his tea, waiting. Finally, she whispered, "He thinks I stole it." "Stole what?" Poirot asked, his voice soft as a feather. "The story," she said, her eyes wet. "It's not true, but it's based on something I heard, a real murder years ago. I changed it, made it mine, but Lyle knows the family. He says I used their pain for profit." Poirot nodded. The motive was clear. Clara lied to protect her book, her name, her future. She wasn't a thief, but she was scared Lyle would ruin her. And Lyle? His motive was power. He wanted to control Clara, maybe force her to write what he wanted. Teaching Hastings that night, Poirot told Captain A. Hastings the story over dinner. Hastings, as usual, was amazed. "How'd you know she was lying about the book, Poirot? You didn't even read it." Poirot smiled. "The motive, Hastings." Her hands shook, her voice faltered, all when Lyle was near. Why? She feared him. And fear is a motive for lies. Hastings frowned. "But how do you find the motive?" "Think," Poirot said. "What does the person want? Money, safety, love? Watch their actions, hear their voice, ask why. The motive is the heart of the lie." Hastings tried. "Today, a man at the club said he wanted cards, but he kept rubbing his neck." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Good. Why rub his neck? Was he nervous, hiding a loss, wanting to seem rich? That's the motive talking." Hastings laughed. "I'll never catch up to you, Poirot." "You will," Poirot said. "Just ask. Why?" "The truth." Unmasked Poirot didn't let Clara suffer. He met Lyle, polite but firm, and asked about the book. Lyle smirked, saying Clara borrowed the story from a tragedy he knew. Poirot listened, heard the greed in Lyle's voice, and saw his motive. Control. Lyle wanted Clara to write for him, to make him rich. Poirot went to Clara's publisher, not Lyle, but the company owner. He explained the truth. Clara's story was inspired, not stolen. It was fiction, not a crime. The owner agreed, and Lyle was told to back off. Clara's book stayed on the shelves, and she thanked Poirot with tears in her eyes. The motive, Clara's fear, Lyle's greed, had been the key. Poirot found it by watching, listening, and thinking. The mask of the lie was gone. The lesson motives are the roots of lies. People don't lie for no reason. They want something, or they're scared of losing something. Poirot found the truth by asking, why? Why did Clara shake? Why did Lyle glare? The answers showed the lie. Try it. Next time someone acts strange. 2. Quiet, too loud, too nervous. Ask why. What do they want? What are they hiding? That's the mask of motive, and peeling it off brings you closer to the truth. Chapter 5. Decoding the Eyes. Hercule Poirot sat on a park bench, his gloved hands resting on his cane, his hat tilted just so. The spring air was crisp, and children ran past, chasing a ball, while pigeons pecked at crumbs. Poirot's mustache twitched as he watched. Not the children, not the pigeons, but a man sitting across the park. The man was reading a newspaper, or pretending to. His eyes, Poirot noticed, weren't on the page. They darted left, right, then down, quick as a mouse. To anyone else, he was just a man enjoying a sunny day. To Poirot, he was a book, and his eyes were the words. Poirot believed the eyes were windows to the truth. People could fake a smile, control their voice, or hold their hands still, but the eyes, they were harder to hide. A flicker, a squint, a stare too long or too short. These were clues, tiny flashes that betrayed a lie. This chapter is about how Poirot read those eyes, how he decoded their silent language to find the secrets people tried to keep. The language. Of the eyes, Poirot learned to watch eyes when he was young, back in Belgium. As a policeman, he questioned all sorts: thieves, shopkeepers, nervous wives. Words could be practiced, but eyes told the real story. A thief swearing he was innocent might blink too fast. A wife hiding a secret might look away at the wrong moment. Poirot saw it all, and his skill grew sharper with every case. In London, his eye reading became an art. He could sit in a crowded room, sip his coffee, and know who was nervous, who was hiding something just by watching their eyes. A quick glance at a door might mean someone expected trouble. A stare at the floor could show shame. Eyes, Poirot said, spoke louder than words. If you knew how to listen. Let's see it work. One rainy afternoon, Poirot was at a train station, waiting for a friend. The platform was busy, people with umbrellas, porters pushing carts, voices echoing off the walls. Poirot stood near a ticket booth, his coat buttoned tight, his eyes scanning the crowd. That's when he noticed her. A young woman in a blue hat, buying a ticket. She was polite, her voice steady as she spoke to the clerk, but her eyes gave her away. She kept glancing over her shoulder, not at anything specific, just quick, sharp looks, like she was checking for danger. When the clerk handed her the ticket, her eyes flicked to a man nearby, a tall fellow in a brown coat reading a timetable. She froze for a split second, her eyes wide, then looked down fast. Poirot's mind clicked. She knew the man. She was scared of him. But why? The woman took her ticket and hurried to the platform, her steps quick. The man in the brown coat didn't follow, but his eyes did. They locked onto her, narrow and hard, before he went back to his timetable. Poirot saw it all. Most people would miss it, too busy with their own rush. But Poirot's eyes caught the story in theirs. Fear, recognition, something hidden. Reading the signals, Poirot had rules for decoding eyes. He didn't just stare and guess. He watched for patterns, small signs that added up. Here's how he did. A movement. Eyes that darted too much showed nerves. The woman's quick glances over her shoulder screamed worry. Steady eyes might mean confidence or a practiced lie. Direction. Where someone looked mattered. Looking down often meant shame or hiding. Looking away could mean avoiding the truth. The woman's eyes dropped when she saw the man. Guilt or fear. Timing. A quick glance at the wrong moment was a clue. When the woman saw the man, her eyes widened for a second. That flash of fear was a signal. Expression. Eyes weren't just about movement, they showed feelings. Wide eyes could mean surprise or panic. Narrow eyes like the man's could mean anger or focus. Poirot read both. Context. Eyes didn't tell the whole story alone. Poirot matched them to the situation. The woman was buying a ticket, maybe running away. The man was watching, maybe chasing her. Poirot didn't jump to answers. He collected. These clues let his little gray cells sort them and asked, "What's the story?" The woman's eyes said she was scared. The man's eyes said he was hunting. But why? That was the puzzle. The train station tail Poirot didn't follow the woman right away. He was too clever for that. Instead, he watched the man in the brown coat. The man stayed by the timetable, but his eyes kept flicking to the platform where the woman had gone. Poirot moved closer, pretending to check his watch, his ears open. The man muttered something to himself. Low, angry words Poirot couldn't catch. But his eyes, narrow and sharp, told Poirot enough. This man was trouble. Poirot boarded the same train as the woman, not because he was nosy, but because his instincts hummed. He found her in a quiet carriage sitting by the window, her blue hat pulled low. Her eyes were on her lap, but they flicked up every few seconds, scanning the door. Poirot sat a few seats away, his newspaper open, his eyes hidden, but watching. When the train started, the man in the brown coat appeared. He walked through the carriage, slow and deliberate, his eyes sweeping over every passenger. When they landed on the woman, they stayed there, cold and hard. She didn't look up, but her hands clenched in her lap. Poirot saw it. The eyes were talking, a silent conversation of fear and threat. Poirot didn't act yet. He waited, letting the clues pile up. The woman's eyes said she was running. The man's eyes said he was chasing. But what connected them? A crime? A secret? Love? Gone wrong? Poirot's gray cells were already at work, digging for answers. After the train stopped, Poirot followed the woman. Not too close, just enough to see where she went. She hurried to a small hotel, her eyes still darting, checking behind her. Poirot didn't follow her inside. Instead, he called a friend, a policeman who owed him a favor. He asked about missing persons, runaway cases, anything that might fit. The policeman mentioned a name. Emily Carter, a young woman who'd left home suddenly. No explanation. Her brother James Carter was looking for her. Poirot's mind clicked. The man in the brown coat. James. He went back to the station the next day, watching for the man. Sure enough, he was there. His eyes still sharp, still searching. Poirot approached, polite as always. "Pardon, monsieur," he said, "but you seem troubled. May I assist?" The man, James Carter, scowled, but his eyes softened for a moment. "My sister," he said, his voice rough. "She ran off. I need to find her." Poirot nodded, but his eyes were on James's. They were angry, yes, but also worried. Not a hunter's eyes, a brother's. Emily was running, but James wasn't. Chasing to hurt her. He was scared for her. The motive was starting to show. Teaching Hastings that evening, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a warm fire. Hastings, as usual, was wide-eyed. "Her eyes? Really, Poirot? You got all that from her eyes?" Poirot smiled. "The eyes, Hastings. They do not lie easily." Emily's eyes showed fear. James's showed worry. Together, they tell a story. Hastings rubbed his chin. "I saw a chap today at the market, kept looking at his watch, then at the crowd." Poirot leaned forward. "Good. Where did his eyes go? Fast? Slow? Did they widen?" Hastings groaned. "I didn't notice that much." "Next time," Poirot said, "watch the eyes. They speak when words do not." The truth revealed. Poirot found Emily at the hotel using a gentle knock and a kind voice. "Mademoiselle Carter," he said, "I am Hercule Poirot. I wish to help." Her eyes widened. Fear again. But she let him in. Her story spilled out. She'd run from home after a fight with James. He wanted her to marry a man she didn't love, a rich one who'd save the family's debts. Emily refused, but James pushed. Scared, she fled, thinking he'd force her back. Her eyes, darting at the station, were watching for him. Poirot found James, too. His eyes told the truth. He wasn't angry, just desperate to keep his sister safe. Poirot brought them together, not with force, but with words. Emily's eyes softened when James promised to listen. James's eyes teared up when she hugged him. The lie, Emily's flight, James's chase was built on misunderstanding. Poirot's eyes saw it all. The lesson eyes are the hardest to fake. They flicker, widen, or stare, giving away fear, guilt, or worry. Poirot read them like a book, matching their signals to the situation. You can too. Watch someone's eyes next time they speak. Do they look away? Stare too long? That's where the truth hides. Chapter 6. The Rhythm of Speech. Hercule Poirot sat in a cozy corner of a bustling London pub, the air thick with the smell of ale and roasted meat. His small, neat figure seemed out of place among the loud laughter and clinking glasses, but his eyes were sharp and his ears were sharper. He wasn't there for the food or the drink. He was listening, not just to words, but to the way they danced. The rhythm of speech, Poirot knew, was like a heartbeat. It could stay steady or it could skip, stumble, or race, and those changes told him when someone was hiding the truth. People could choose their words carefully, but the rhythm of their speech, the speed, the pauses, the way they strung sentences together, was harder to control. A liar might talk too fast to cover a weak story or pause too long while inventing one. Poirot's ears caught these shifts like a musician hearing a wrong note. This chapter is about how he used the rhythm of speech to unravel lies, peeling back the surface to find the secrets underneath. The music of words. Poirot's love for speech started young, back in Belgium. As a boy, he noticed how his teachers spoke, slow and clear when explaining, fast and sharp when scolding. As a policeman, he questioned suspects and saw how their speech changed under pressure. A thief might rush through an alibi, tripping over words. A witness might hesitate before naming a friend. These weren't just mistakes, they were clues, hidden in the flow of their voices. In London, Poirot turned this skill into an art. He could sit in a room, sip his tisane, and hear the rhythm of every conversation. A man bragging about a deal might speed up when he got to the details, as if racing past a lie. A woman saying, "I'm fine," might slow down, her voice heavy, betraying her worry. Poirot called it the rhythm of speech. It wasn't just what people said, but how they said it, the beat, the tempo, the stumbles that showed him the truth. Let's see it in action. One chilly evening, Poirot was at a charity auction in a grand hall, all glittering lights and fancy dresses. People bid on paintings and vases, their voices loud and cheerful. Poirot, in his neat suit, stood near the back watching and listening. His eyes landed on a man named Mr. Robert Finch, a jeweler with a shiny watch and a wide smile. Finch was bidding on a gold necklace, his voice bold as he called out, £50. But Poirot's ears caught something. When Finch bid, his words came fast, too fast, like he was in a hurry. And when the auctioneer asked, "Any more details, Mr. Finch?" his answer slowed, each word careful, like he was stepping over cracks. "It's a fine piece," he said, pausing too long before fine. The crowd didn't notice, clapping as the necklace went to him. But Poirot did. That pause, that rush, was a signal. Finch was hiding something. Later, as guests mingled, Poirot overheard Finch talking to a woman in a green dress. "The necklace is perfect for my shop," he said, but his words tumbled out quick and he laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't match his smile. The woman nodded, but Poirot's ears were buzzing. Finch's rhythm was off. Why was he nervous about a necklace? Catching the beat. Poirot had rules for reading speech, just like a musician reading notes. He didn't just listen for mistakes. He listened for patterns. Here's how he did it. Speed. Fast speech often meant nerves or a rehearsed lie. Finch's quick bid sounded like he wanted to get them over with. Slow speech could mean someone was thinking too hard, making up a story. Pauses. A pause at the wrong moment was a red flag. Finch's hesitation before fine showed he was choosing his words carefully, maybe too carefully. Rhythm changes. A steady voice that suddenly sped up or slowed down was a clue. Finch's bold bids turned slow when asked for details. That shift meant something. Repetition. Liars sometimes repeated words to buy time. If someone said, I was at home," The stumble could mean they were inventing tone and flow. A voice that sounded too smooth, like a speech practiced in a mirror, was suspicious. So was a voice that broke, like Finch's laugh, not matching the words. Poirot didn't guess. He let the rhythm tell the story. Finch's fast bids, slow answers, and sharp laugh all pointed to a lie. But what was it? Was the necklace stolen? Was he hiding its value? Poirot's ears had the clues. His gray cells would find the motive. The auction puzzle. Poirot didn't confront Finch at the auction. He was too clever for that. Instead, he watched. Finch carried the necklace in a velvet box, showing it off to guests. But his eyes kept darting to the door, and his voice sped up every time someone asked about the piece. "Just a good find," he said, the words rushing out. Poirot's ears caught the hurry, the strain. The next day, Poirot visited Finch's jewelry shop, a small place with sparkling cases of rings and watches. He pretended to browse, his cane tapping the floor, his eyes polite but sharp. "A fine shop, monsieur," he said. "That necklace from the auction, it must be a treasure." Finch smiled, but his voice was too quick. "Oh yes, a great buy. We'll sell fast." He paused, then added, "Got it cheap, you know." The pause, the rush, the extra words. Poirot heard it all. Finch was nervous and his speech was shouting it. Poirot didn't push. He thanked Finch, left, and made calls. He had a friend, a jeweler named Mr. Potts, who knew the trade. Potts said the necklace sounded like one stolen from a private collection, months ago. A rare piece worth far more than £50. Interesting. Was Finch fencing stolen goods? Or was he tricked into buying it? Poirot went back to the auction hall, chatting with the organizer. He asked about Finch, casual as ever. The organizer shrugged. "He's a regular. Always bids big, talks fast, paid cash for the necklace." Cash. Another clue. Cash was hard to trace. Finch's fast speech, his cash payment, his nervous laugh, they were building a picture. Digging deeper, Poirot kept listening. He visited the pub near Finch's shop where jewelers and traders gathered. He sat quietly, sipping tea, his ears open. A man mentioned Finch, saying, "He's been jumpy lately, keeps talking about a big sale." The man's voice was steady, but when someone asked him what sale, he hesitated, then said, "Dunno, just heard him mention it." That pause caught Poirot's ear. Even this man was hiding something. Poirot went back to Finch's shop, this time with a question. "Monsieur Finch," he said, "this necklace, it is very unique, no? Where did you find such a piece?" Finch's smile froze and his answer came too fast. "Oh, just a dealer, you know, a good deal." He laughed, but it was sharp, and his words tripped over each other. Poirot nodded, but his gray cells were spinning. Finch's rhythm was all wrong, too fast, too forced. Poirot checked with his policeman friend. The stolen necklace matched Finch's, gold with a rare sapphire. Finch wasn't a thief, but he might have bought it from one knowing it was stolen. His fast speech, his pauses, his nervous laugh, they all pointed to guilt, or at least fear, of being caught. Teaching Hastings that night, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a late supper. Hastings, chewing a sandwich, was amazed. "You got all that from how he talked, Poirot? Just the speed?" Poirot sipped his wine. "The rhythm, Hastings." Finch's words rushed when he spoke of the necklace, slowed when he lied. "The rhythm tells the truth." Hastings frowned. "I heard a chap at the club today. Said he was late because of a train, but he kept stopping like he was thinking." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Good. Why the stops? Was he making it up? Covering for something? Listen to the rhythm, Hastings. It speaks." Hastings laughed. "You make it sound easy." "It is not," Poirot said. "But it is learnable. Watch the speed, the pauses. They are the music of the lie." The truth uncovered, Poirot didn't let Finch slip away. He invited him to tea, just the two of them, in a quiet cafe. Finch came, his smile tight, his voice quick. "What's this about, Mr. Poirot?" he asked, words tumbling. Poirot was calm, his voice smooth. The necklace, monsieur. It is stolen, yes? Finch's laugh was sharp, his words fast. No, just a deal. A good one. But Poirot heard the rhythm, too quick, too shaky. He leaned forward. Your voice, it betrays you. The rush, the pauses. Tell me the truth. Finch broke. He'd bought the necklace cheap from a shady dealer, knowing it might be stolen. He thought he could sell it fast, make a profit, and no one would know. But he was scared. Scared of the police. Scared of the truth. His fast speech, his nervous laughs had given him away. Poirot didn't call the police. He told Finch to return the necklace to its owner, quietly, and make things right. Finch agreed, his voice slow now, honest. The lie was gone, unraveled by the rhythm of his speech. The lesson. The rhythm of speech is a window to the truth. People can hide their words, but the speed, the pauses, the flow, they slip through. Poirot listened for these, caught the stumbles, and found the lie. You can too. Next time someone speaks, hear the beat. Do they rush, pause, stumble? That's where the truth hides. Chapter 7. The body's betrayal. Hercule Poirot stood in the corner of a busy London train station, his cane tapping lightly on the tiled floor, his mustache neat as ever. The air buzzed with the clatter of footsteps, the whistle of trains, and the hum of voices. People rushed past, men with briefcases, women with hats, children tugging at their parents. To most, it was just a crowd. To Poirot, it was a stage, and every person was an actor, their bodies telling stories their words tried to hide. A fidgety hand, a stiff shoulder, a foot tapping too fast, these were the body's betrayals, clues to the lies people told. Poirot knew that words could be planned, voices practiced, even eyes controlled. But the body? It was harder to tame. A nervous twitch, a crossed arm, a step backward. These were honest even when the mouth wasn't. This chapter is about how Poirot read the body's silent language, how he caught the truth in movements most people ignored, and how you can learn to see it too. The body speaks. Poirot's knack for reading bodies started young. In Belgium, as a boy, he watched his neighbors, how a baker's hands shook when he lied about shortchanging a customer, how a teacher stood rigid when hiding a mistake. As a policeman, he saw it more. Suspects slouching to seem relaxed, or leaning forward, too eager to convince. The body, Poirot learned, couldn't help but tell the truth, even when the person lied. In London, this skill was his secret weapon. He could walk into a room, sip his tea, and see who was nervous, who was hiding something, just by watching their hands, feet, or shoulders. A man scratching his nose during a story might be covering a lie. A woman crossing her arms might be guarding a secret. Poirot called it the body's betrayal, the way movements gave away what words tried to hide. Let's see it in action. One crisp morning, Poirot was at a flower market, the air sweet with roses and lilies. Stalls lined the street, vendors shouting prices, customers haggling. Poirot, in his tidy coat, browsed the blooms, but his eyes were on a man buying tulips. The man, Mr. Edward Tate, was tall, with a loud voice and a friendly smile. He handed the vendor coins, saying, "Keep the change." But Poirot noticed something off. Tate's hands moved too fast, shoving the coins into the vendor's palm like he wanted to be done. His feet shifted, one tapping the ground, as if ready to run. When the vendor said, "Nice choice, sir," Tate nodded, but his shoulders hunched just a little and his smile didn't reach his eyes. To the crowd, he was a cheerful buyer. To Poirot, his body was shouting, something was wrong. As Tate walked away, a woman called out, "Edward, wait." She was older, with a shawl and a worried face. Tate turned, his smile still there, but his hands clenched into fists, and he took a small step back. "Just getting flowers, Aunt Mary," he said, his voice bright. But his body, those fists, that step, told Poirot he was hiding something. Reading the signs, Poirot had rules for reading bodies like a detective studying footprints. He didn't just watch for random twitches, he looked for patterns. Here's how he did it: hands. Hands were loud, Fidgeting, clenching, or hiding in pockets could mean nerves or guilt. Tate's quick coin toss and clenched fists showed he was uneasy. Posture. A stiff back might mean someone was trying to seem confident. A slouch could mean they felt guilty. Tate's hunched shoulders hinted at discomfort. Feet. Feet often moved without thinking. Tapping, shifting, or pointing away could show someone wanted to leave. Tate's tapping foot screamed he was in a hurry. Gestures. Big gestures like waving hands could hide a lie by distracting. Small ones like touching the face might show nerves. Tate's fast hand movements were a cover. Context. Movements meant nothing alone. Poirot matched them to the situation. Tate was buying flowers. Why the rush? Why the fists when his aunt called? Poirot didn't guess. He collected these clues, let his little gray cells sort them, and asked, "What's the story?" Tate's body. Said he was nervous, maybe scared. But why? Was he hiding from his aunt? Was the money stolen? Poirot's eyes were on the case. The flower market mystery Poirot didn't follow Tate right away. He was too smart for that. Instead, he chatted with the vendor, his voice warm. "A generous man, that Mr. Tate," he said, nodding at the coins. The vendor shrugged. "He's here often, but always in a rush. Paid with a big coin today. Odd for tulips." Poirot's ears perked up. A big coin for cheap flowers? He thanked the vendor and wandered the market, watching Tate from a distance. Tate met his aunt, his smile back, but his hands stayed in. His pockets and his feet pointed away like he wanted to bolt. His aunt talked, her hands waving, her voice loud. Tate nodded, but his body was stiff, his shoulders tight. Poirot's mind clicked. Tate's body was betraying a lie. Maybe about the money, maybe about why he was there. He needed more clues. The next day he visited the market again, this time talking to other vendors. One knew Tate. "He's always buying flowers, but never takes them home," the vendor said. "Leaves them with a girl down the street." A girl? Poirot's gray cells hummed. He found the girl, a young woman selling ribbons, her smile shy. She admitted Tate gave her flowers often, but her eyes dropped when Poirot asked why. Her hands twisted her apron, a body's betrayal. She was hiding something too. Digging for the truth, Poirot didn't push the girl. He went back to the market, watching Tate again. This time Tate was with a man in a dark coat, their heads close, their voices low. Tate's hands were out of his pockets now, waving fast like he was explaining something. The other man's posture was stiff, his arms crossed. Poirot couldn't hear their words, but their bodies spoke. Tate was pleading. The man was angry. Poirot called his friend, a policeman named Collins. He asked about Tate, casual as ever. Collins knew him, Edward Tate, a clerk, no record, but lately seen with shady types. The big coin, the flowers, the girl, the man in the dark coat, Poirot's. Clues were piling up. Tate's body, his fidgety hands, his tapping feet said he was scared. But of what? Poirot visited the ribbon girl again, gentle and kind. "Mademoiselle," he said, "Mr. Tate gives you flowers, yes? But why?" Her hands twisted harder. Her shoulders slumped. "He's kind," she mumbled, but her body screamed she was lying. Poirot didn't press. He watched her stall, saw Tate come by later. Tate's hands were shaky, his steps quick. He gave her flowers, but his body turned away fast, like he didn't want to be seen. The girl's hands clutched the flowers, her eyes on the ground. Poirot saw it. They were connected, and their bodies were shouting a secret. Teaching Hastings. That night, Poirot told Captain Hastings the story over tea. Hastings, munching a biscuit, was amazed. His hands, his feet? You got all that from how he moved? Poirot smiled. The body, Hastings, it betrays the lie. Tate's hands shook, his feet tapped. He was hiding something. Watch the body, not just the words. Hastings frowned. "I saw a man today, at the bank. Kept rubbing his neck when he talked about his boss." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Good. Why the neck?" Nerves? Guilt? Watch the body, Hastings. It speaks when the mouth lies. Hastings laughed. You see everything, Poirot? Not everything, Poirot said. But enough. Watch and learn. The truth revealed, Poirot didn't wait long. He invited Tate to his apartment, offering tea and a kind smile. Tate came, his hands in his pockets, his feet shifting. What's this about, Mr. Poirot? He asked, his voice too loud. Poirot was calm. The flowers, monsieur, the big coin, the girl. Your body, it tells me you are scared. Tate's shoulders stiffened, his hands clenched. Poirot saw it and leaned forward. Tell me the truth. Tate broke. He wasn't a criminal, just a fool. The girl was his sweetheart, but her brother, the man in the dark coat, disapproved. Tate was giving her flowers to win her over, using money he'd borrowed from a shady lender. The big coin was a mistake. He was nervous, scared the lender would come after him. His body, with its twitches and shifts, had told the story. Poirot helped. He spoke to the girl's brother, calming his anger, and convinced Tate to pay back. The lender honestly. The lie, about the money, the flowers, was gone, undone by the body's betrayal. The lesson: the body can't lie easily. Hands fidget, feet tap, shoulders slump, and they tell the truth. Poirot watched these signs, matched them to the moment, and found the lie. You can too. Next time someone speaks, watch their hands, their posture, their feet. Do they move too much? Too little? That's the body's betrayal showing you the truth. Chapter 8. The Importance of Context, Hercule. Poirot sat at a small table in a bustling London tea room, the air sweet with the scent of scones and jam. His cane rested against his chair, his mustache gleamed, and his sharp eyes scanned the room. Waiters darted between tables, plates clinked, and voices mixed in a cheerful hum. To most, it was just a busy afternoon. To Poirot, it was a puzzle, each person a piece that only made sense when placed in the right context. The where, when, and who of their actions. A nervous glance might mean nothing in a park, but everything in a courtroom. A loud laugh could be joy at a party or a mask in a tense meeting. Context, Poirot knew, was the frame that turned clues into truth. Poirot believed that no clue stood alone. A shaky hand, a quick word, a darting eye, these meant little without understanding the situation around them. Was the person alone or with a rival? Was it a quiet morning or a stressful night? Context gave clues their meaning, and lies their shape. This chapter is about how Poirot used context to unravel lies, how he saw the bigger picture to spot the cracks in a story, and how you can do the same. The frame of truth: Poirot learned the power of context as a young man in Belgium. As a policeman, he saw how the same action could mean different things depending on the setting. A man running in a park might be exercising. A man running from a bank might be a thief. He questioned suspects and noticed how their stories changed, with the place or people around them. A woman might lie smoothly to a stranger but stumble when her husband was near. Context was the key to understanding why. In London, Poirot's skill sharpened. He could walk into a room and feel the air, tense, happy, or heavy with secrets. He watched not just the person, but the world around them. Who they were with, where they were, what was happening. A man fidgeting in a church might be nervous about a secret meeting. A woman whispering at a loud party might be hiding something from the crowd. Poirot called it the importance of context. It was like reading a book. You couldn't understand a sentence without knowing the chapter. Let's see it in action. One sunny afternoon, Poirot was invited to a garden party at a grand house just outside London. The lawn was bright with flowers, tables groaned with cakes and lemonade, and guests chatted under wide hats. Poirot, in his crisp suit, stood by, a rose bush, his eyes and ears open. He noticed a young man, Mr. Albert Moore, laughing with a group of friends. His voice was loud, his smile wide, but Poirot saw something off. Moore's hands were in his pockets, one thumb rubbing the fabric, a nervous habit. When a woman in a yellow dress joined the group, Moore's laugh grew louder, but his feet shifted, pointing away from her. He said, "Wonderful party, isn't it?" But his eyes flicked to the house. then back. To the guests, he was just cheerful. To Poirot, his body and words didn't match the context. The woman in yellow, Miss Jane Holt, smiled back, but her hands twisted her necklace, and her voice was sharp when she said, "Yes, Albert, very nice." The other guests didn't notice, but Poirot did. The context, the party, their history, the tension between them, made their actions scream. Something was wrong, and Poirot's gray cells were already asking, why? Understanding the scene, Poirot had rules for using context, like a painter choosing the right frame. He didn't just see clues, he placed them in the moment. Here's how he did it. Where are they? The place mattered. A nervous man in a bank might be hiding a crime. In a hospital, he might just be worried about a loved one. Moore's fidgeting at a happy party was odd. It didn't fit. Who's around? People acted differently depending on their company. Moore's loud laugh grew louder when Jane joined. Was he hiding something from her, or showing off? What's the mood? A tense room changed how clues looked. The party was light, but Moore and Jane's tension stood out, like a dark cloud on a sunny day. What's at stake? Context included what someone might lose or gain. Was Moore nervous about money, love, or a secret? Jane's sharp voice suggested she knew something he didn't want shared. Timing. When something happened was key. Moore's eye flicked to the house came when Jane appeared. Was he looking for an escape? Or someone else? Poirot didn't guess. He let the context shape the clues. Moore's thumb rubbing, his shifting feet, his loud laugh. They meant nothing. Alone. But at a party with Jane nearby, they told a story. Poirot just needed to find it. The garden party puzzle. Poirot didn't confront Moore at the party. He was too polite, too clever. Instead, he mingled, his ears catching snippets of talk. He heard Jane whisper to a friend, "Albert's not himself today." Her voice was low, worried. Poirot's eyes saw her glance at Moore, her hands still twisting her necklace. The context, her worry, his nerves, pointed to a shared secret. Later, Poirot chatted with the host, a jolly man named Mr. Baxter. He asked about Moore, casual as ever. Baxter laughed. "Albert's always the life of the party, but he's been odd lately. Keeps looking at the house." Poirot nodded, his gray cells clicking. The house. Why the house? Poirot wandered closer to the house, a big stone building, with ivy on the walls. He saw Moore slip inside, his steps quick, his hands still in his pockets. Poirot didn't follow. He watched. A few minutes later, Moore came out, his face pale, his walk slower. The context had shifted. Moore's nerves were tied to something inside the house. Poirot asked Baxter more questions, gentle ones. He learned Moore was a guest staying at the house for the weekend. Jane was his cousin, and they'd been close but argued lately. About what? Baxter didn't know, but he mentioned a locked room upstairs one Moore asked about. Interesting. Digging. Deeper. Poirot didn't barge into the house. He went back the next day, invited for tea. He watched Moore, who was quieter now, his hands still fidgety. Jane was there too, her eyes on Moore, her voice sharp when she spoke to him. "You're staying longer, Albert?" she asked, and his answer, "Maybe," was quick, his shoulders stiff. Poirot's mind worked. The context, the house, the locked room, their argument, pointed to a secret. He spoke to the housekeeper, a chatty woman who loved to talk. She said Moore had been seen near the locked room looking nervous. "It's Mr. Baxter's study," she said. "Nobody goes in there." Poirot's gray cells hummed. A locked study, Moore's glances, Jane's tension. He called a friend, a clerk who knew the Baxters. The clerk mentioned a rumor. Baxter kept valuable papers in his study, business deals, maybe a will. Moore, the clerk said, was in debt. The context was clear. Moore wanted something in that room. Teaching Hastings that evening, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a glass of wine. Hastings, as usual, was amazed. The house? His cousin? How do you know it's about the study, Poirot? Poirot smiled. Context, Hastings. Moore's nerves at the party, his glances at the house, Jane's worry, they only make sense together. The study is the key. Hastings frowned. I saw a man at the club kept looking at the door when he talked about his job. Poirot's eyes lit up. Good. Why the door? Was he scared? Expecting someone? The place, the people, that's the context. It shapes the clue. Hastings laughed. I'll never see it like you. You will, Poirot said. Watch the scene, not just the man. Context tells the story. The truth unraveled. Poirot didn't wait long. He spoke to Baxter, suggesting a check of the study. Baxter, curious, agreed. They found the lock tampered with, and inside, papers were out of place. Moore was called in, his face pale, his hands shaking. Poirot didn't accuse. He asked, calm and kind. Monsieur Moore, you wanted these papers, yes? Moore broke. He'd heard Baxter was changing his will, cutting out family like Moore and Jane. In debt, desperate, Moore thought he could sneak a look, maybe steal a copy. Jane knew and tried to stop him, scared he'd ruin them both. Their tension, Moore's glances, all made sense in the context of the locked study. Poirot convinced Baxter to talk to Moore, not punish him. Moore confessed, Jane apologized, and the family promised to work it out. The lie, Moore's cheerful act, Jane's sharp words, was undone by the context Poirot saw. The lesson context is the frame of truth. A clue means nothing without the where, who, and when. Poirot saw the scene, the party, the house, the tension, and found the lie. You can too. Next time you see something odd, ask, where are they? Who's nearby? What's the mood? That's the context, and it shows the truth. Chapter 9. Unveiling Hidden Connections. Hercule Poirot sat in a quiet corner of a London library, the air heavy with the smell of old books and polished wood. His gloved hands rested on his cane, his mustache perfectly trimmed, and his sharp eyes scanned the room. Readers bent over pages, their whispers soft, their footsteps muffled. To most, it was just a library. Calm, ordinary. To Poirot, it was a web. Each person, each glance, each whispered word a thread connecting to something bigger. Lies, he knew, didn't float alone. They were tied to people, places, and secrets, and finding those connections was how he unraveled them. Poirot believed that no lie stood by itself. A nervous glance might link to a hidden meeting. A dropped name might tie to a forgotten crime. People lied to protect something, or someone, and those ties were the clues Poirot chased. This chapter is about how he found those hidden connections, how he saw the threads others missed, and how you can learn to spot them too. The web of truth. Poirot's knack for finding connections started young in Belgium. As a boy, he noticed how people were linked, friends who shared secrets, neighbors who avoided each other. As a policeman, he saw it more clearly. A thief's alibi might depend on a friend's lie, or a wife's silence might protect a husband's crime. The truth wasn't in one person. It was in the ties between them, the invisible lines that held their stories together. In London, Poirot turned this skill into a science. He could walk into a room and sense the connections. Who stood too close? Who avoided eye contact? Who mentioned a name too casually? A man saying I was alone might be lying if his coat smelled of perfume. A woman claiming I don't know him might flinch when his name came up. Poirot called it unveiling hidden connections. It was like untangling a knot, one thread at a time, until the lie fell apart. Let's see it in action. One foggy evening, Poirot was at a small theater, the kind with creaky seats and dim lights. The play was loud, all shouting actors and dramatic music, but Poirot wasn't watching the stage. He was watching the audience. In the third row, a woman named Mrs. Laura Bell sat stiffly, her hands folded tight. Next to her was a man, Mr. Charles Dunn, who clapped too loudly, his smile too wide. To the crowd, they were just theater-goers. To Poirot, they were connected. Mrs. Bell's eyes flicked to Dunn once, quick and sharp, then away. Dunn's hands twitched when she moved, like he was aware of her every breath. When the play ended, they left separately, but Poirot saw Dunn glance back at her, his smile gone. The connection was there, hidden, but real. Why were they pretending not to know each other? What tied them together? Tracing the threads, Poirot had rules for finding connections, like a detective following footprints. He didn't just see clues. He looked for what linked them. Here's how he did it. Watch for reactions. A glance, a flinch, a sudden silence could show a connection. Mrs. Bell's quick look at Dunn was a thread tying them together. Listen for names. People dropped names by accident or on purpose. If someone mentioned a place or person too often, it was a clue. Poirot listened for those. Notice patterns. Repeated actions like Dunn's twitching hands near Mrs. Bell showed they were linked, even if they didn't speak. Check the setting. Where people met mattered. A theater was public, a place to hide in plain sight. Why were they there together but acting apart? Ask why. Every connection had a reason. Were they hiding a friendship, a crime, a love? Poirot's gray cells chased the motive behind the link. Poirot didn't guess. He collected threads, glances, names, movements, and wove them into a picture. Mrs. Bell and Dunn were connected, and their act of separation was a lie. The question was, what were they hiding? The theater puzzle. Poirot didn't approach Mrs. Bell or Dunn at the theater. He was too clever for that. Instead, he watched them leave, noting how Dunn waited until Mrs. Bell was out of sight before heading the same way. Poirot followed, keeping his distance, his cane silent on the pavement. They didn't meet, but their paths crossed at a street corner, where Dunn paused, looking at a shop window. Mrs. Bell passed by, her steps quick, her eyes on the ground. No words, but the connection was there. The next day, Poirot visited the theater again, this time to talk to the ticket seller. He asked about Mrs. Bell and Dunn, casual as ever. The seller shrugged. They come often, but never together. She buys a ticket, he buys one later. Always sit close, though. Poirot's ears perked up. A pattern, a hidden connection. Poirot called a friend, a gossip-loving clerk who knew London's social scene. The clerk knew Mrs. Bell, a widow, quiet, lived alone. Dunn was a lawyer, charming but in debt. They'd been seen at the same cafe, once but never spoke. Interesting. Why the secrecy? Poirot's gray cells were spinning, tying the threads, the theater, the glances, the cafe. He went to the cafe, a small place with checkered tablecloths. He sat, sipped tea, and watched. Mrs. Bell came in alone, her hands tight on her bag. Dunn arrived minutes later, sitting far away, but his eyes flicked to her. When a waiter asked Mrs. Bell about her day, she said, "Just shopping," but her fingers tapped the table, and her voice was too quick. Dunn, hearing her, shifted in his seat, his hand brushing his coat pocket. Poirot saw it all. A connection, hidden, but strong. Digging deeper, Poirot didn't confront them. He dug deeper, visiting the theater again. This time he noticed a program, in Mrs. Bell's hand, folded tightly with a note tucked inside. She slipped it into her bag when she thought no one was looking. Dunn, nearby, touched his pocket again. The same pocket. Poirot's mind clicked. A note, a shared secret. He called his policeman friend Collins and asked about Dunn. Collins knew him, a lawyer with a clean record, but rumors of gambling debts. Mrs. Bell was trickier, no record, but her late husband had left debts too. Poirot's gray cells hummed. Debts a note, secret meetings at the theater. The connection was growing clearer. Poirot went back to the cafe, watching Mrs. Bell again. This time she met a man, not Dunn, but a rough-looking fellow with a scar. She passed him something small, her hands shaky, her eyes darting. The man nodded and left. Poirot saw Dunn across the street, watching, his face pale, his hand in that pocket again. The web was bigger than Poirot thought. Teaching Hastings that night, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a late dinner. Hastings, as usual, was amazed. "They don't even talk, Poirot. How do you know they're connected?" Poirot smiled. "The threads, Hastings." Her glance, his twitch, the note. "They are linked even if they hide it. Context shows the web." Hastings frowned. "I saw a woman at the station kept looking at a man. They didn't speak, but she smiled when he did." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Good. A smile, a look, that's a connection. Why? Love? A plan? Watch for the threads, Hastings." Hastings laughed. "You see it all, Poirot?" "Not all," Poirot said, "but enough. Find the connections, and the lie falls apart." The truth. Unraveled Poirot didn't wait long. He invited Mrs. Bell to tea, his voice kind, his smile warm. She came, her hands nervous, her eyes avoiding his. "Mademoiselle Bell," he said, "you and Mr. Dunn, you share a secret, yes?" Her hands froze. "I don't know him," she said, but her voice shook and her fingers tapped. Poirot leaned forward. "The theater, the note, the man with the scar, they connect you." She broke. She and Dunn were in debt to the same man, the scarred one, a lender who demanded payment. They'd met by chance, planned to pay him off. Together, passing notes to avoid being seen. The theater was their cover, a place to exchange plans without talking. Their lie, pretending not to know each other, was to keep the lender from suspecting. Poirot helped. He spoke to Collins, who knew the lender. The man was caught, the debts forgiven, and Mrs. Bell and Dunn were free. Their secret connection, unveiled by Poirot's sharp eyes, had saved them. The lesson lies are tied to connections, people, places, secrets. Poirot found the truth by spotting the threads, a glance, a note, a shared fear. You can too. Next time you see someone act strange, look for links. Who do they watch? What do they touch? Where do they go? Those connections unravel the lie. Chapter 10. The Psychology of Deception. Hercule Poirot sat in his neat London apartment, the evening light casting long shadows across his polished desk. His hands, small and precise, held a cup of steaming tisane, its minty scent filling the air. Outside, the city hummed. Car horns, footsteps, distant voices. Inside, Poirot's world was quiet, his sharp eyes fixed on nothing, his mind alive with thought. He wasn't thinking about a case, not yet. He was thinking about people, why they lied, what pushed them to twist the truth. To Poirot, lies weren't just words. They were born in the heart, shaped by fear, greed, or love. Understanding those feelings was his key to unraveling deception. Poirot knew that lies came from the mind's deepest corners. A man might lie to save his pride, a woman to protect her family, a child to escape punishment. The psychology of deception, the reasons behind the lie, was what Poirot studied. It wasn't enough to hear a lie or see a nervous twitch. He had to know why it was there, what drove it. This chapter is about how Poirot used the psychology of deception to find the truth, how he read the emotions behind the lie, and how you can learn to do the same. The roots of Lee Poirot's understanding of why people lied began in Belgium, where he watched people as a young policeman. He saw thieves lie to avoid jail, wives lie to hide shame, friends lie to keep peace. At first, he thought lies were just tricks, but soon he saw deeper. Lies came from feelings: fear of being caught, desire for respect, pain of losing something dear. Every lie had a reason, and that reason was the path to the truth. In London, Poirot's skill grew sharper. He could sit in a cafe, watch a stranger, and guess their motives. A man boasting about money might be hiding debt, driven by pride. A woman saying, "I'm fine," might be masking grief, scared to seem weak. Poirot called it the psychology of deception. It was about understanding the heart, what made it beat faster, what made it hide. Let's see it in action. One rainy afternoon, Poirot was at a small art gallery, the kind with quiet rooms and paintings of stormy seas. The gallery was hosting a sale and people milled about, their voices low, their eyes on the art. Poirot, in his tidy coat, stood near a painting of a ship, watching a young woman named Miss Sophie Lane. She was bidding on a small canvas, her voice clear as she called, £20. But Poirot saw something off. Sophie's hands were steady, her smile polite, but her eyes flickered with worry, and her shoulders were tight, like she was holding her breath. When the auctioneer said, "Sold," her smile grew, but it was too big, too fast, like a mask slipping on. To the crowd, she was just a buyer. To Poirot, her heart was shouting something else. A man nearby, Mr. Henry Cole, clapped for her, but his clap was slow, his face stiff. "Nice choice, Sophie," he said, his voice flat. Sophie's smile faltered and she turned away, her fingers brushing her hair, a nervous tick. Poirot's gray cells clicked. Sophie was lying about something, and Cole was part of it. But why? What was driving them? Understanding the heart, Poirot had rules for reading the psychology of deception, like a doctor checking a pulse. He didn't just see the lie, he looked for the feeling behind it. Here's how he did it: fear. Many lies came from fear of punishment, shame, or loss. Sophie's tight shoulders and worried eyes suggested she was scared. Of what? Losing the eye? Painting or something bigger? Pride? People lied to look better, richer, smarter, braver. Sophie's big smile might be hiding a weakness, like she needed to seem confident. Love or loyalty. Lies often protected someone else. Was Sophie bidding for herself or someone dear? Cole's flat voice hinted he knew more than he said. Greed. Wanting money or power drove many lies. Was the painting worth more than Sophie said? Was Cole involved in a scheme? Guilt. A lie could hide a wrong. Sophie's nervous tick, Cole's stiff face. Were they guilty of something tied to the painting? Poirot didn't guess. He watched, listened, and thought about what feelings could push someone to lie. Sophie's worry, Cole's coldness, they were clues to their motives, and motives were the roots of deception. The gallery puzzle. Poirot didn't approach Sophie or Cole at the gallery. He was too smart for that. Instead, he watched them leave, noting how Sophie clutched the painting's receipt, her steps quick. Cole followed at a distance, his hands in his pockets, his eyes on her back. They didn't speak, but their actions screamed a connection. Poirot's mind buzzed. What was tying them together? The next day, Poirot visited the gallery again, chatting with the owner, a chatty man named Mr. Gibbs. He asked about Sophie, casual as ever. Gibbs smiled. She's a regular, loves art, but never bids so high. Odd for a shop girl. A shop girl? Poirot's ears perked up. Why would a shop girl spend £20 on a painting? He asked about Cole. Gibbs frowned. He's a dealer, always sniffing around. Didn't bid today, just watched Sophie. Poirot nodded, his gray cells spinning. A shop girl with money, a dealer watching her. There was a story here, and it wasn't about art. Poirot went to Sophie's workplace, a small dress shop. He pretended to browse, his cane tapping, his eyes kind. Sophie was behind the counter, her smile polite but her hands shaky. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice too bright. Poirot saw her glance at a letter on the counter, then tuck it, away fast. The letter was a clue, and her quick move was driven by fear. Digging deeper, Poirot didn't touch the letter. He went to a cafe across from the shop, sipping tea, watching. Cole appeared standing outside, his eyes on the shop's door. When Sophie stepped out for a break, their eyes met for a second and she froze, her hand brushing her hair again. Cole turned away, but his walk was stiff, like he was angry. Poirot saw it. Fear in her, anger in him. A psychological puzzle. He called his friend Constable Collins and asked about Sophie and Cole. Collins knew Cole, a dealer with a clean record but known for shady deals. Sophie was new to London, no record, but her boss had mentioned a sick father back home. Poirot's mind clicked. A sick father, a big bid, a shady dealer. The psychology was clear. Sophie was desperate, maybe for money, and Cole was part of it. Poirot visited the gallery again, this time checking the painting's records. It was a minor work, not worth much, but Gibbs mentioned a rumor. It might be a copy of a more valuable piece. Was Sophie tricked? Or was she part of a scam? Poirot's gray cells chased the motives: fear, greed, or loyalty, teaching Hastings that night. Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a warm supper. Hastings, as usual, was amazed. "You got all that from her smile, Poirot?" And his face? Poirot sipped his wine. "The psychology, Hastings. Sophie's worry, Cole's anger. They lie for reasons. Fear, pride, love. Find the feeling. Find the lie." Hastings frowned. "I saw a man at the pub. Said he was happy but kept sighing." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Good. Why the sigh? Hiding sadness? Fear? The heart speaks, Hastings. Listen to it." Hastings laughed. "You make it sound simple." "It is not," Poirot said, "but it is learnable. Watch for fear, pride, guilt. They drive the lie." The truth. Unraveled. Poirot invited Sophie to tea, his voice kind, his smile warm. She came, her hands nervous, her eyes down. "Mademoiselle Lane," he said, "the painting, it is not for you, yes? You bid for someone else." Sophie's eyes widened, her breath caught. "How?" She started, then stopped. Poirot leaned forward. "Your fear, it shows. Tell me." She broke. Her father was sick, needing expensive care. Cole, the dealer, promised her money if she bid on the painting, a fake meant to trick a rich buyer. Sophie lied about her reasons, driven by love for her father. Cole lied to hide his scam, driven by greed. Their emotions had betrayed them, and Poirot saw it. Poirot didn't call the police. He spoke to Gibbs, who stopped the sale. Sophie returned the painting, and Cole was warned to leave her alone. Her father got help thanks to Poirot's quiet work. The lie, born of fear and greed, was undone by understanding the heart. The lesson lies come from feelings: fear, pride, love, guilt. Poirot found the truth by reading the psychology behind the lie, seeing what drove people to hide. You can too. Next time someone acts strange, ask, are they scared, proud, guilty? Those feelings are the roots of deception, and finding them unveils the truth. Chapter 11. Patterns in Chaos. Hercule. Poirot stood at the edge of a crowded London market, his cane planted firmly on the cobblestones, his mustache gleaming under the morning sun. The market was a whirlwind, vendors shouting, baskets of apples, and fish spilling over, people bargaining, laughing, rushing. To most, it was just noise, a jumble of colors and sounds. To Poirot, it was a puzzle, a mess of clues waiting to be sorted. Beneath the chaos, he saw patterns, small, repeated actions, like a man checking his watch too often or a woman touching her scarf every time she spoke. These patterns, Poirot knew, were the threads that led to the truth. Lies thrived in chaos, Poirot believed. People thought a busy scene or a loud story could hide their secrets. But no matter how messy things seemed, there was always order, a rhythm of habits, a trail of clues. Finding those patterns was how Poirot unraveled lies. This chapter is about how he saw order in disorder, how he spotted the habits that gave away deception, and how you can learn to do the same. Finding order in the mess. Poirot's knack for seeing patterns started young, in Belgium. As a boy, he watched his village, how the baker always wiped his hands before lying about prices, how a neighbor tapped her foot when hiding gossip. As a policeman, he saw it more clearly. Suspects repeated small actions when nervous, like scratching a nose or clearing a throat. These weren't random. They were patterns, signs of a lie trying to stay hidden. In London, Poirot's skill was like a compass in a storm. He could step into a noisy room, a busy street, or a tense meeting and find the order. A man might lie with wild stories, but if he tugged his ear every time he spoke, that was a pattern. A woman might dodge questions, but if she always looked left when she did, that was a clue. Poirot called it patterns in chaos. It was about seeing the small, repeated things that stood out against the noise. Let's see it in action. One windy afternoon, Poirot was at a horse race. The stands packed with cheering crowds, the air thick with the smell of grass and sweat. Men in hats waved betting slips, women shouted for their favorite horses, and bookmakers called out odds. Poirot in his neat suit stood near a betting booth, his eyes scanning the crowd. That's when he noticed Mr. George Vance, a short man with a loud tie and a louder voice placing bets. Vance was cheerful, slapping friends on the back, saying, "This horse is a sure thing." But Poirot saw something. Every time Vance placed a bet, he rubbed his left wrist, a quick, small move. When a man asked, "You sure about that horse, George?" Vance laughed, but his wrist rub came again and his eyes flicked to the ground. To the crowd, he was just a happy bettor. To Poirot, his repeated action was a pattern, a sign of something hidden. Nearby, a woman, Miss Ellen Price, stood watching Vance. She was quiet, her hands folded, but when Vance laughed, she bit her lip. Just for a second. It happened again when he placed another bet. Same lip bite, same quick glance at him. Poirot's gray cells clicked. Two patterns, Vance's wrist rub, Ellen's lip bite, tied them together in the chaos of the race. Spotting. The patterns Poirot had rules for finding patterns like a hunter tracking footprints. He didn't just notice random actions, he looked for what repeated. Here's how he did it. Repeated actions. Small habits like Vance's wrist rub showed nerves or a lie. If they happened every time he spoke, it wasn't chance. It was a pattern timing. When did the action happen? Vance rubbed his wrist when betting or answering questions. That timing pointed to what made him nervous. Connections. Patterns often linked people. Ellen's lip bite came when Vance acted. Were they hiding something together? Context in chaos. A busy place like a racetrack made lies feel safe, but patterns stood out. Vance's loud voice didn't hide his wrist rub. Ellen's quiet stance didn't hide her lip bite. Test the pattern. Poirot watched to see if the action repeated in new settings. If Vance rubbed his wrist elsewhere, or Ellen bit her lip again, the pattern was real. Poirot didn't guess. He collected these patterns, let his little gray cells sort them, and asked, "What do they mean?" Vance's wrist rub and Ellen's lip bite were clues in the chaos, pointing to a lie. But what was it? The racetrack riddle Poirot didn't approach Vance or Ellen at the race. He was too clever for that. Instead, he watched them through the day. Vance kept betting, his wrist rub coming every time he handed over money. Ellen stayed close, her lip bite flashing when Vance lost a race, her hands twisting her scarf. They didn't speak, but their patterns screamed a connection. The next day, Poirot went to a pub near the racetrack, a favorite spot for bettors. He saw Vance there laughing with friends, but the wrist rub came again when someone asked, "Good day at the races, George?" Vance said, "Oh, one big." But his wrist moved and his laugh was too loud. Poirot's ears caught the lie. His eyes saw the pattern. Ellen was there too, sitting alone, her eyes on Vance. When he boasted, she bit her lip again, her fingers tight on her glass. Poirot sipped his tea and thought. The patterns were clear. Vance's wrist rub when talking money. Ellen's lip bite when he lied. Were they partners? Was Vance in trouble and Ellen worried? Poirot chatted with the pub's bartender, casual as ever. "That Mr. Vance, he bets a lot, yes?" The bartender nodded. "Too much. Owes money all over. Always rubbing that wrist when he's short on cash." Poirot's gray cells clicked. A pattern tied to money and debt. Digging deeper, Poirot didn't stop there. He visited the racetrack again, watching Vance place more bets. The wrist rub came every time, stronger, when he lost. Ellen was there, her lip bite flashing when Vance argued with a bookmaker. Poirot saw another clue. A man in a gray cap, watching them both, his face hard. When Vance passed him, the man's hand touched his pocket, like checking something. Another pattern. Poirot called his friend Constable Collins and asked about Vance. Collins knew him. A gambler, deep in debt to a rough lender. The man in the gray cap, maybe. Ellen was his sister, always trying to help him. The patterns were forming. A picture. Vance's wrist rub showed his fear of debt. Ellen's lip bite showed her worry for him. The gray cap man was the key. Poirot went back to the pub watching the gray cap man. He was quiet, but his hand kept touching his pocket when Vance was near. Poirot saw it, a pattern of threat. The man was pressuring Vance, and Ellen knew it. Teaching. Hastings that night, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a warm supper. Hastings, as usual, was amazed. A wrist rub? A lip bite? You got all that from little things, Poirot? Poirot smiled. Patterns, Hastings. In chaos they shine. Vance's wrist rub, Ellen's lip bite. They repeat, they connect. Find the pattern, find the lie. Hastings frowned. I saw a man at the station kept checking his watch when he talked about his train. Poirot's eyes lit up. Good. Why the watch? Nervous? Late? Hiding something? Patterns show the truth, Hastings. Hastings laughed. You see it all? Poirot. Not all, Poirot said, but enough. Watch for what repeats and the chaos clears. The truth unraveled. Poirot didn't wait long. He invited Vance and Ellen to tea, his voice kind, his smile warm. Vance came, his wrist rub constant, his laugh forced. Ellen's lip bite flashed when Poirot mentioned the races. Monsieur Vance, Poirot said, your bets, they trouble you, yes? And you, Mademoiselle Price, you worry for him. Vance's wrist stopped. Ellen's lip trembled. They broke. Vance owed money to the gray-cap man, a lender who threatened him. Ellen tried to help, covering his losses, but they lied to hide his debts, scared of shame. Their patterns, wrist rub, lip bite, had betrayed them. Poirot helped. He spoke to Collins, who warned the lender off. Vance promised to stop betting, and Ellen agreed to help him pay back slowly. The lie, hidden in the chaos of the racetrack, was undone by Poirot's eye for patterns. The lesson chaos hides lies, but patterns reveal them. A repeated action, a nervous habit, they stand out if you look. Poirot saw the wrist rub, the lip bite, and found the truth. You can too. Next time you're in a busy place, watch for what repeats. A glance, a twitch, a word. Those patterns cut through the chaos and show the lie. Chapter 12. The Trap of Assumptions. Hercule Poirot sat in a quiet London cafe, the kind with steamed-up windows and the warm smell of fresh bread. His cane leaned against his chair, his mustache was perfect, and his sharp eyes watched the world outside. People hurried through the rain, men with umbrellas, women clutching coats, a boy splashing in puddles. To most, they were just strangers. To Poirot, they were puzzles, each one a story waiting to be read. But he didn't guess their stories. He waited for clues. Assumptions, Poirot knew, were traps, quick ideas that could lead you far from the truth. A man running might seem guilty, but maybe he was just late. A woman crying might seem sad, but maybe she was hiding joy. Only facts, not guesses, showed the way. Poirot believed that jumping to conclusions was the fastest way to miss the truth. People lied, and their lies were built to trick you into assuming things: guilt, innocence, love, hate. Poirot avoided those traps by sticking to what he saw, heard, and knew. This chapter is about how he dodged assumptions, how he let evidence guide him to unravel lies, and how you can learn to do the same. The danger of guessing. Poirot learned to avoid assumptions young in Belgium. As a boy, he saw a man shouting and thought, angry. But later, he learned the man was excited, not mad. As a policeman, he made mistakes, thinking a nervous suspect was guilty, only to find they were scared for someone else. Assumptions, he saw, were like fog. They blurred the truth. So he trained his mind to wait, to collect clues before deciding what they meant. In London, this skill was his shield. He could sit in a crowded room, watch a nervous smile or hear a shaky voice, and not decide what it meant right away. A man saying I was home might seem guilty if his hand shook, but Poirot didn't assume. Was he nervous about a lie or just tired? Only clues would tell. Poirot called it the trap of assumptions. It was about staying open, letting facts build the story, not guesses. Let's see it in action. One chilly morning, Poirot was at a train station, the platform buzzing with travelers, suitcases rolling, voices calling, whistles blowing. Poirot stood near a bench, his coat buttoned, his eyes scanning the crowd. That's when he noticed a woman, Mrs. Agnes Reed, standing by a ticket booth. She was older, with a gray scarf and a tight frown, clutching a small bag. Her eyes darted to a young man nearby, Mr. Tom Weaver, who was pacing, his hands in his pockets. To most, it looked simple. An older woman, maybe annoyed, and a young man, maybe late for a train. But Poirot didn't assume. Mrs. Reed's frown deepened when Weaver paced closer, and her fingers gripped her bag tighter. Weaver's pacing was fast, and he kept glancing at her, his jaw tight. When a porter asked Mrs. Reed, "Going far, ma'am?" She snapped, "Just visiting family," her voice sharp. Weaver stopped pacing for a second, then started again, faster. The crowd might assume they were strangers, or that Mrs. Reed was grumpy, or Weaver was nervous about a train. Poirot didn't. Their actions, her grip, his glances, her sharp voice suggested a connection, a tension. But what? He didn't guess. He watched. Avoiding the trap, Poirot had rules for dodging assumptions, like a sailor steering clear of rocks. He didn't let first impressions trick him. Here's how he did it. Wait for clues. A single action wasn't enough. Mrs. Reed's frown might mean anger, but Poirot needed more. Her grip, her voice, Weaver's pacing. Question first thoughts. If something seemed obvious, Poirot doubted it. Weaver's pacing looked like nerves, but was it about the train, Mrs. Reed, or something else? Look for contradictions. Assumptions fell apart when clues didn't match. Mrs. Reed said family, but her tight grip suggested fear, not a happy trip. Test the scene. Poirot watched longer to see if actions repeated or changed. If Weaver kept glancing at Mrs. Reed, it wasn't random. It was a clue. Stay open. Poirot didn't decide until he had enough facts. Was Mrs. Reed angry, scared, or hiding something? He let the evidence tell him. Poirot didn't assume Mrs. Reed and Weaver were strangers or enemies or friends. Their actions, her grip, his glances, were clues. But the truth needed more. He let his gray cells wait, collecting pieces of the puzzle. The train station. Mystery Poirot didn't approach Mrs. Reed or Weaver at the station. He was too smart for that. Instead, he watched them board the same train, sitting far apart but stealing glances. Mrs. Reed's bag stayed close, her hands never leaving it. Weaver's pacing stopped, but his fingers tapped his knee, fast and restless. Poirot boarded too, sitting where he could see them both, his newspaper up but his eyes sharp. On the train, Mrs. Reed spoke to a passenger saying, "I'm visiting my sister," but her voice was too loud and her eyes flicked to Weaver. He looked away, his tapping faster. To the passenger, it was just small talk. To Poirot, it was a lie that didn't fit. Why the loud voice? Why the glance? He didn't assume she was lying about her sister. He waited for more clues. At the next station, Weaver got off, his steps quick. Mrs. Reed stayed, but her shoulders relaxed just a bit. Poirot followed Weaver, keeping his distance. Weaver met a man in a dark coat outside the station, their heads close, their voices low. Weaver's hands were out now, waving fast like he was explaining. The man in the coat nodded, but his face was hard. Poirot didn't assume they were plotting. He watched. Digging deeper, Poirot went back to the station the next day, this time talking to the ticket seller. "That Mrs. Reed? She travels often?" he asked, his voice kind. The seller shrugged. "First time I've seen her. Paid cash, no return ticket." Cash. No return. Poirot's gray cells clicked. Was she running? Hiding? He called his friend Constable Collins and asked about Mrs. Reed and Weaver. Collins knew Weaver, a small-time clerk, no record, but seen with rough types lately. Mrs. Reed was harder to trace, but her address led to a boarding house, and the landlady said she'd been jumpy lately, always clutching a bag. Another clue. Poirot visited the boarding house, chatting with the landlady. She mentioned a visitor, a man in a dark coat like the one Weaver met. Mrs. Reed had argued with him, her voice sharp, her hands tight on her bag. Poirot didn't assume it was the same man. He checked. He found Weaver at a pub, talking to the dark coat man again, his hands still waving, his voice low. The connection was there, but Poirot didn't jump to conclusions. Teaching Hastings that night, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a warm fire. Hastings, as usual, was amazed. "You didn't think they were fighting, Poirot? Or that she was a crook?" Poirot smiled. "Assumptions, Hastings, are traps. Her grip, his glances. They mean something, but what? I wait for facts, not guesses." Hastings frowned. "I saw a woman at the shop, kept checking her watch. I thought she was late." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Good. But why the watch? Late? Nervous? Hiding? Don't assume, Hastings. Watch. Wait. Learn." Hastings laughed. "You're impossible, Poirot." "Not impossible," Poirot said. "Careful. Avoid the trap, and the truth comes clear." The truth unraveled. Poirot invited Mrs. Reed to tea, his voice gentle, his smile warm. She came, her bag close, her eyes wary. "Madam Reed," he said, "your bag, it is precious, yes? And Mr. Weaver, he watches you?" Her hands tightened. "I don't know him," she said, but her voice was too quick. Poirot leaned forward. "Your fear, his glances, the man in the coat, they tell a story, tell me." She broke. The bag held letters, proof her husband, long dead, had been cheated by a business partner, the man in the dark coat. Weaver was her nephew, trying to help her confront him, but they lied, saying they were strangers to keep the partner from suspecting. Fear drove their lie, and Poirot's refusal to assume had found it. Poirot helped. He spoke to Collins, who tracked the partner. The letters were used to settle the old debt, and Mrs. Reed was free. Weaver thanked Poirot, his pacing gone. Theory, lie built on assumptions others might make, was undone by Poirot's careful eyes. The lesson: assumptions are traps that hide the truth. A glance, a word, a nervous move, they seem clear but don't guess. Poirot waited for facts, let clues build the story. You can too. Next time you see something odd, don't decide what it means. Watch, wait, collect. The trap of assumptions will fade and the truth will shine. Chapter 13. Questioning the obvious. Hercule Poirot sat on a wooden bench in a bustling London park, his cane resting beside him, his mustache gleaming in the late afternoon sun. The park was alive with noise, children laughing, dogs barking, couples strolling along gravel paths. To most, it was just a cheerful scene, a slice of everyday life. To Poirot, it was a stage where truths and lies played out, often disguised as the obvious. A smiling face might hide worry, a casual word might mask a secret. Poirot knew that what seemed clear, obvious, was often a trap, a lie dressed up to fool the careless. To find the truth, he questioned everything, especially what looked certain. Poirot believed that the obvious was the liar's best friend. People accepted simple stories, a lost wallet, a late train, a friendly smile, without a second thought. But Poirot never took things at face value. A story that fit too neatly was suspicious. A smile too perfect was a clue. This chapter is about how Poirot questioned the obvious, how he peeled back the surface to find the lies beneath, and how you can learn to do the same. Doubting the surface. Poirot's habit of questioning the obvious began in Belgium, as a young policeman. He once arrested a man who seemed guilty, caught near a stolen bike, his hands dirty, his story shaky. Everyone said, "Thief." But Poirot paused. Why was the man there? Was the bike really stolen? Digging deeper, he found the man was fixing it for a friend, not stealing. The obvious had lied, and Poirot learned to doubt it. In London, this skill was his sword. He could sit in a cafe, hear a man say, "I was at home," and not believe it just because it sounded normal. A woman claiming, "I forgot my purse," and might seem honest, but Poirot asked, "Why forget? Why now?" He called it questioning the obvious. It was about looking past the easy story to find the cracks where truth hid. Let's see it in action. One foggy evening, Poirot was at a small dinner party in a cozy townhouse, the kind with flickering candles and the smell of roast chicken. The guests were chatty, friends, neighbors, a few strangers, laughing over wine and stories. Poirot, in his neat suit, sat quietly, his eyes sharp. He noticed a woman, Mrs. Clara Wade, telling a story about losing her watch at the market. "It just slipped off," she said, her smile sad, her hands waving. The guests nodded, sympathetic. "Oh, how awful," they said. But Poirot didn't nod. The story was too simple, too neat. Mrs. Wade's smile was bright, but her eyes flicked to a man across the table, Mr. Paul Gray, who was stirring his soup, his face blank. When someone asked, "Was it valuable, Clara?" she laughed and said, "Oh, not really," but her fingers twisted her napkin and her voice caught just for a second. Gray's spoon paused, then moved again, too fast. To the guests, it was just a lost watch. To Poirot, the obvious was a lie, challenging the story. Poirot had rules for questioning the obvious, like a detective testing a lock. He didn't accept easy answers, he poked at them. Here's how he did it: doubt the simple. If a story fit too well, it was suspicious. Mrs. Wade's lost watch tale was too tidy. Everyone loses things, so why question it? Poirot did. Look for cracks. Small signs, Mrs. Wade's twisted napkin, Gray's fast spoon, showed the story wasn't as smooth as it seemed. Ask why. Why tell this story? Why now? Was Mrs. Wade hiding something about the watch? Was Gray involved? Check the details. Obvious stories often fell apart under scrutiny. A lost watch should leave a trace, a search, a report. Poirot looked for what wasn't there. Watch the reactions. How did others respond? Gray's pause, his quick spoon, his reaction to Mrs. Wade's story was a clue. Poirot didn't assume Mrs. Wade was lying about the watch, or that Gray was her partner in crime. He questioned the obvious and let the clues guide him. The twisted napkin, the caught voice, the fast spoon, they were threads to pull. The dinner party puzzle. Poirot didn't confront Mrs. Wade at the table. He was too polite for that. Instead, he watched her through the evening. She told the watch story again to another guest, and the same signs appeared. Napkin twisting, eye flicked to Gray. Gray stayed quiet, but his hands gripped his glass when she spoke, and he left the table early, saying, "Just need air." His voice was calm, but his steps were quick. The next day, Poirot visited the market where Mrs. Wade said she lost the watch. He chatted with a vendor, his voice kind. "A lady lost a watch here, yes?" The vendor shook his head. Nobody mentioned a watch. People always report lost things. Poirot's gray cells clicked. No report, no search. The obvious story was cracking. He went to Mrs. Wade's neighborhood, asking a shopkeeper about her. The shopkeeper knew her. Nice lady, but worried lately. Keeps checking her purse. Worried? Poirot's mind hummed. He asked about Gray, and the shopkeeper frowned. He's her friend, always around, but they've been odd. Quiet, like they're hiding something. Poirot didn't assume they were thieves or lovers. He dug deeper, visiting a jeweler who knew Mrs. Wade. The jeweler said her watch wasn't cheap. It was a family heirloom worth a lot. Why say it wasn't valuable? The obvious lie was unraveling. Digging deeper, Poirot watched Mrs. Wade at a cafe the next day. She sat alone, her hands still twisting. Her scarf now, not a napkin. Gray walked by, not stopping, but their eyes met, and her fingers froze. Gray's walk slowed, his hand brushing his coat pocket. Poirot saw it. A connection, hidden in plain sight. He called his friend, Constable Collins, and asked about Mrs. Wade and Gray. Collins knew Gray, a salesman, no record, but struggling with money. Mrs. Wade was a widow living off a small pension. The jeweler's words echoed. An heirloom watch, valuable. Poirot's gray cells spun. Was the watch really lost or sold? Was Gray helping her or using her? Poirot went back to the market, this time talking to a pawnshop owner nearby. He asked about a watch, describing Mrs. Wade's. The owner nodded. A man brought one like that last week. Sold it cheap, said it was his. A man. Gray? Poirot didn't assume. He checked. The pawnshop's record showed a sale by P. Gray. The obvious story, no watch, just lost, was falling apart. Teaching. Hastings that night, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a warm supper. Hastings, as usual, was amazed. "You didn't believe she lost it, Poirot? It sounded so normal." Poirot smiled. "The obvious, Hastings, is a trap. Her story was too neat, her hands too nervous. I questioned it, and the truth came." Hastings frowned. "I heard a man say he missed his bus, seemed upset. I believed him." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Good, but why upset? Was it really the bus, or something else? Question the obvious, Hastings." Hastings laughed. "You're too clever." "Poirot." "Not clever," Poirot said. "Careful. Doubt the easy story and the lie shows itself. The truth." Unraveled, Poirot invited Mrs. Wade and Gray to tea, his voice kind, his smile warm. They came, nervous, their eyes avoiding each other. "Madame Wade," Poirot said, "your watch, it was not lost, yes? It was sold." He turned to Gray. "And you, monsieur, you helped." Mrs. Wade's hands shook. Gray's jaw tightened. They broke. The watch was sold to pay Mrs. Wade's debts. She was ashamed to admit it. Gray, her friend, took it to the pawn shop, lying to protect her pride. They said it was lost to avoid questions, but their nervous hands, their quick glances had betrayed them. Poirot helped. He spoke to the pawn shop owner, who returned the watch for a fair price. Mrs. Wade's debts were settled with help from friends, and Gray promised to be honest. The obvious lie, lost watch, was undone by Poirot's refusal to accept it. The lesson, the obvious is a liar's trick. Stories that seem normal, a lost watch, a late train, can hide the truth. Poirot questioned them, looked for cracks, and found the lie. You can too. Next time you hear an easy story, doubt it. Look for signs, nervous hands, quick words. Question the obvious and the truth will rise. Chapter 14. The Weight of Silence. Hercule Poirot sat in a dimly lit drawing room of a grand London house, his small hands folded neatly over his cane, his mustache as sharp as ever. The room was quiet, save for the soft crackle of a fireplace and the tick of a clock. A handful of guests sat around a polished table, their faces lit by candlelight, their voices low. To most, the silence between their words was just a pause, a moment of nothing. To Poirot, it was heavy, a clue as loud as a shout. Silence, he knew, could hide more than words. A secret, a fear, a lie waiting to be found. Poirot believed that what people didn't say was often more telling than what they did. A pause before answering, a refusal to speak, a sudden hush when a name was mentioned. These were the silences that spoke to him. Liars used words to build their stories, but silence was harder to control. It leaked truth like water through a crack. This chapter is about how Poirot read the weight of silence, how he listened to the unspoken to unravel lies, and how you can learn to do the same. The voice of silence. Poirot's understanding of silence began in Belgium, where he watched people as a young policeman. He noticed how suspects fell quiet when asked certain questions, their lips tight, their eyes darting. A thief might talk fast about his day but go silent when asked where he was at night. A witness might chat happily until a friend's name came up, then say nothing. These silences weren't empty. They were full of meaning, if you knew how to hear them. In London, Poirot's skill grew sharper. He could sit in a noisy room, hear a conversation stop, and know why. A man who didn't answer a simple question might be hiding guilt. A woman who went quiet when someone entered might be afraid. Poirot called it the weight of silence. It was about listening to what wasn't said, the pauses, the hesitations, the sudden stillness, and finding the truth they held. Let's see it in action. One cold evening, Poirot was invited to a family gathering at a merchant's home, a place of velvet curtains and silver teapots. The family, Mr. and Mrs. Norton, their son James, and their daughter Lily, sat around a table, sharing stories of their day. The mood was warm, the food rich, but Poirot's eyes were sharp. his ears tuned to the quiet moments. Mr. Norton was loud, boasting about his business. But when Mrs. Norton mentioned a recent trip to Paris, he went silent. His fork, pausing midair. James, the son, kept talking, but his voice was too quick, filling the gap. Lily, the daughter, stared at her plate, her hands still, saying nothing. To the guests, it was just a lull in chatter. To Poirot, the silence was heavy. Why did Mr. Norton freeze? Why did James rush to speak? Why did Lily say nothing? The obvious story, a happy family, was hiding something. Hearing the unspoken, Poirot had rules for reading silence, like a musician listening for a missing note. He didn't just notice quiet moments, he studied them. Here's how he did it: pauses. A sudden stop before answering was a clue. Mr. Norton's pause when Paris was mentioned wasn't random. It meant something. Refusals. Not answering at all was louder than words. Lily's silence when her father froze suggested she knew why. He stopped, filling the gap. When someone spoke too fast to cover a silence like James, it showed they were hiding something. Body with silence. Silence often came with signs. Mr. Norton's paused fork, Lily's still hands. These gave the silence weight. Context. Why was the silence there? A happy family dinner should flow, but Paris stopped it. Poirot asked, "Why Paris?" Poirot didn't. Assume the Nortons were lying about Paris, or that Lily was guilty, or James was covering a crime. He listened to the silence, let his gray cells work, and waited for more clues to shape the truth. The family dinner puzzled Poirot didn't speak up at the dinner. He was too clever for that. Instead, he watched the Nortons through the evening. Mrs. Norton tried to change the subject after Paris, saying, "Lovely weather." But her voice was tight and she glanced at her husband. Mr. Norton nodded, but his silence lingered, his eyes on his plate. James kept talking, about school, about friends, but his hands fidgeted and he avoided looking at Lily. Lily stayed quiet, her fork moving slowly, her face blank. The next day, Poirot visited the Nortons' neighborhood, chatting with a shopkeeper who knew them. "Fine family," the shopkeeper said, "but they've been odd since that Paris trip." Poirot's ears perked up. "Odd?" he asked. The shopkeeper shrugged. "Quiet, like they're keeping something in." Poirot didn't assume it was a crime. He went to a cafe where James often met friends sitting nearby, his newspaper up but his ears open. James was there talking loudly, but when a friend asked, "How was Paris?" he went silent, then said, "Fine," too fast, his hands twisting his spoon. The silence, the rush, Poirot heard it all. He spoke to a maid at the Nortons' house, gentle as ever. She said Mrs. Norton had cried after Paris and Lily hadn't spoken much since. Mr. Norton, she added, locked his study door now, something new. Silence, tears, a locked door. The pieces were piling up, but Poirot didn't guess what they meant. Digging deeper, Poirot watched the Nortons at another gathering, this time a tea party. Mr. Norton was cheerful again, but when a guest mentioned Paris fashion, he went quiet, his fingers tapping his cup. James jumped in, saying, "London's better for clothes," his voice loud, his eyes on his father. Lily said nothing, her hands folded, her gaze on the floor. The pattern was clear. Paris brought silence, and silence brought lies. Poirot called his friend Constable Collins and asked about the Nortons. Collins had little, respectable family, no record, but mentioned a Paris business deal Mr. Norton had bragged about, though it fell through. A deal? Poirot's gray cells hummed. He visited a banker who knew Norton, asking about Paris. The banker frowned. He lost money there, won't talk about it. Family took it hard. The silence was starting to speak. Mr. Norton's pauses. Lily's quiet, James's rushed words. They were hiding a failure, maybe shame. But Poirot didn't assume. He checked. He found a letter in the Nortons' trash tossed by the maid, mentioning a Paris investor and losses. The silence had a shape now. Teaching Hastings. That night, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a glass of wine. Hastings, as usual, was amazed. They just stopped talking, Poirot, and you knew it was Paris? Poirot smiled. Silence, Hastings, is loud. Their pauses, their stillness, they hid a secret. I listened, and Paris spoke. Hastings frowned. I saw a man at the club went quiet when I asked about his job. Poirot's eyes lit up. Good. Why the silence? Shame? Fear? A secret? Hear the quiet, Hastings. It tells the truth. Hastings laughed. You're uncanny, Poirot. Not uncanny, Poirot said. Attentive. The weight of silence shows the lie. The truth unraveled. Poirot invited the Nortons to tea. His voice kind, his smile warm. They came, nervous, their eyes wary. Monsieur Norton, he said, Paris was not a success, yes? And you, Madame, James, Lily, you hide it. Mr. Norton's fork clinked. Lily's hands froze. James opened his mouth, then shut it. Silence. Poirot leaned forward. Your pauses. They speak. Tell me. They broke. Mr. Norton had lost money in a bad Paris deal, nearly ruining them. He lied, saying it was fine, to protect his pride. Mrs. Norton and James covered for him, scared of shame. Lily stayed silent, angry at the secrecy. Their silences, pauses, refusals, rushed words, had betrayed the truth. Poirot helped. He spoke. To the banker, who arranged a loan to ease the Nortons' debts. The family agreed to be honest, and Lily spoke again, her silence gone. The lie, hidden in the weight of their pauses, was undone by Poirot's keen ears. The lesson silence is a clue heavy with truth. A pause, a refusal to speak, a sudden hush. They hide lies. Poirot listened to the quiet, saw what it meant, and found the truth. You can too. Next time someone goes silent, notice. Why? What's unsaid? The weight of silence reveals the lie. Chapter 15. The final puzzle. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand foyer of a London mansion, his polished shoes gleaming on the marble floor, his cane tucked under one arm. The air was thick with the scent of roses from vases taller than he was, and a crystal chandelier sparkled above. Guests milled about, men in sharp suits, women in glittering dresses, laughing, clinking glasses, their voices a lively hum. To most, it was a dazzling party, a night of wealth and cheer. To Poirot, it was a puzzle, a tangle of lies waiting to be solved. Every glance, every pause, every nervous twitch was a piece, and only by fitting them together could he find the truth. Poirot had spent his life honing his skills, watching eyes, hearing silences, reading bodies, finding patterns, and questioning the obvious. But his true genius was in combining them, letting each clue inform the others like notes in a symphony. This chapter is about how Poirot used all his techniques to solve a final, complex case, a web of deception that tested every lesson he'd learned. It's the story of how he unraveled the ultimate lie and how you can use his methods to see the truth in your own world. The puzzle takes shape. The party was hosted by Sir Henry Langley, a rich banker known for his charm and big deals. Poirot was there as a guest, invited for his reputation, but his eyes were working, his little gray cells alert. The mansion was a maze of rooms with a wide staircase leading to private offices upstairs. Guests flowed in and out, but Poirot noticed a small group near the library door. Sir Henry, his secretary Miss Vera Holt, a businessman named Mr. Philip Marsh, and a young woman, Lady Margaret, Sir Henry's daughter. Sir Henry was laughing, his voice loud, but his hand gripped his glass too tightly, and his eyes flicked to the library door every few seconds. Miss Holt stood close, her smile polite, but her fingers twisted a ring on her hand and her posture was stiff. Mr. Marsh, tall and slick, spoke smoothly about stocks, but when Sir Henry mentioned a new project, Marsh's voice sped up, and he touched his tie. Lady Margaret was quiet, her eyes on her father, but her lips pressed thin, and her hands stayed still, almost frozen. To the guests, it was just a rich man in his circle, maybe planning business. But Poirot saw more. He used every technique he'd mastered. Eyes, Chapter 5. Sir Henry's glances to the library showed worry. Lady Margaret's steady stare at her father hinted at anger or fear. Speech, Chapter 6. Marsh's fast words when talking about the project were a sign of nerves, a crack in his calm. Body language, Chapter 7. Miss Holt's twisting ring and stiff posture screamed tension, not just politeness. Silence, Chapter 14. Lady Margaret's quiet, her refusal to join the talk was heavy, a clue to something unsaid. Context, Chapter 8. A party was a perfect cover for secrets, but the library door and this project made the group stand out. Poirot didn't assume they were plotting or innocent. He let the clues, eyes, words, bodies, silences, build a picture. Something was wrong, and the library was the heart of it. The first threads Poirot didn't interrupt the group. He was too clever for that. He sipped his wine, moved through the crowd, and watched. Sir Henry left the group, greeting guests, but his eyes kept returning to the library. Miss Holt followed him, her steps quick, her ring twisting faster now. Marsh stayed by the door chatting with others, but his hand brushed his tie every time someone mentioned Sir Henry's business. Lady Margaret slipped away, her face pale, heading upstairs. Poirot's gray cells spun, using more techniques. Connections, Chapter 9. The group's glances and movements tied them to the library. Were they hiding something there? Patterns, Chapter 11. Sir Henry's eye flicks, Holt's ring twisting, Marsh's tie touch. They repeated, forming a rhythm of nerves. Psychology, Chapter 10. Fear drove Sir Henry's glances. Maybe pride kept. Marsh talking, and anger or guilt silenced Lady Margaret. He didn't assume the project was a crime or the library held stolen goods. He questioned the obvious, Chapter 13, asking, why the library, why now, why these people? The party was loud, but the clues were louder. Poirot spoke to a waiter, casual as ever. Sir Henry, he uses the library often? The waiter nodded. Locked tight tonight, though, odd for a party. Locked, Poirot's mind clicked. He didn't assume it was suspicious. He watched more, piecing the puzzle. The night grew late, but Poirot stayed sharp. He saw Miss Holt slip a key from her pocket, glance at Sir Henry, and head to the library. Sir Henry followed, his laugh too, loud, his hand wiping his brow. Marsh watched them go, his tie touch faster, his eyes narrow. Lady Margaret reappeared, her hands clenched, her eyes on the library door. Poirot used context, Chapter 8, to understand the scene. A locked library during a party wasn't normal. The group's tension, eyes, hands, silences, pointed to a secret inside. He didn't assume it was money or jewels. He moved closer, pretending to admire a painting near the library, his ears open. He heard a low voice, Miss Holt, saying, "It's safe, but we must hurry." Sir Henry replied, "Not yet." His voice shaky. A rustle, then silence. Poirot's techniques clicked. Speech rhythm, Chapter 6. Holt's urgent tone, Sir Henry's shake. They were scared, rushed. Silence, Chapter 14. The sudden quiet after. Their words meant they were hiding from someone, maybe Marsh or Margaret. Body's betrayal, Chapter 7. Sir Henry's brow wipe was fear, not heat. Poirot didn't barge in. He went back to the party, watching Marsh. Marsh was talking to a guest, but his eyes kept darting to the library, and his hand stayed on his tie. When Lady Margaret passed by, Marsh's voice faltered, and he stepped back, his posture stiff. Poirot saw the connection. Chapter 9. Marsh was linked to Margaret, and both were tied to the library. Digging deeper, Poirot didn't assume a crime yet. He used his network, calling Constable Collins the next day. He asked about Sir Henry, Holt, Marsh, and Margaret. Collins knew Sir Henry, a banker, clean, but stressed lately over a failing deal. Miss Holt was loyal, no record. Marsh was shadier, a traitor with debts, rumored to push risky deals. Lady Margaret was quiet, no trouble but close to her father. Poirot visited Sir Henry's bank, chatting with a clerk. "Big projects lately?" he asked. The clerk frowned. "One deal's gone bad. Documents locked in Sir Henry's library." Documents. Poirot's gray cells hummed. He didn't assume fraud. He checked. He went to a cafe where Marsh met clients sitting nearby, his newspaper up. Marsh was there, talking to a man in a gray suit. "It's in the library," Marsh said, his voice low, his tie touch constant. The man nodded, but his eyes were cold. Poirot heard the psychology. Chapter 10. Marsh's greed, the man's threat. The library documents were the key. Poirot spoke to a maid at the mansion, gentle as ever. She said Lady Margaret had been in the library late at night looking at papers, her face worried. Miss Holt caught her and they argued, then went silent. Silence again. Chapter 14. Heavy with secrets. The final pieces. Poirot didn't assume Sir Henry was a crook, or Marsh a mastermind, or Margaret a victim. He used the trap of assumptions, Chapter 12, to stay open, letting clues build the truth. He returned to the mansion the next evening, invited for tea. Sir Henry was there, his eyes tired, his hand still gripping his glass. Miss Holt was quiet, her ring twisting gone, but her eyes flicked to Sir Henry. Marsh arrived, his tie touch subtle now, his smile too smooth. Lady Margaret sat apart, her hand still, her silence loud. Poirot spoke, his voice calm. "Monsieur Langley, the library. It holds documents, yes? A bad deal, perhaps?" Sir Henry's glass shook, his silence heavy. Miss Holt's eyes widened, her hand frozen. Marsh laughed, too loud, his tie untouched for once. Lady Margaret's lips parted, but she said nothing. Poirot used all his skills, questioning the obvious. Chapter 13. The bad deal story was too simple. Why the secrecy? Why the library? Patterns. Chapter 11. Sir Henry's grip, Holt's glances, Marsh's tie touch, they repeated, tying them to the documents. Connections. Chapter 9. Margaret's silence linked her to the library, and Marsh's words tied him to the gray suit man. He leaned forward. The documents, they are not just a deal. No. They hide a bigger lie. The truth unraveled. Sir Henry broke first, his voice low. "It's a fraud," he whispered. Miss Holt gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Marsh stood, his smile gone, his eyes narrow. Lady Margaret's silence ended. She stood, her voice shaking. "I found them, Father. You lied to us." The truth spilled out, guided by Poirot's steady voice. Sir Henry had signed fake documents for a deal, pushed by Marsh, who promised riches but delivered debts. Miss Holt knew, helping hide the papers out of loyalty. Lady Margaret found the documents, her silence born of anger and fear for her father. Marsh was working with the gray suit man, a crook planning to sell the fake deal to others. Their lies, Sir Henry's cheer, Holt's loyalty, Marsh's charm, Margaret's quiet, were a web. But Poirot's techniques unraveled it. Eyes, speech, body, silence, context, connections, patterns, psychology, assumptions, and questioning all worked together, each clue sharpening the others. Poirot didn't call the police. He convinced Sir Henry to confess to his partners, voiding the deal. Marsh was warned off, the gray suit, man caught by Collins. Miss Holt stayed, her loyalty now honest. Lady Margaret forgave her father, her silence replaced by words. The lie, a puzzle of many pieces, was solved by Poirot's mastery, teaching Hastings. That night, Poirot shared the story with Captain Hastings over a warm fire. Hastings, as usual, was amazed. "You saw it all, Poirot? The eyes, the hands, the silence? Everything?" Poirot smiled. "The puzzle, Hastings. Each clue fits with the others. Eyes speak, silence shouts, patterns guide. Together, they show the truth." Hastings frowned. "I saw a man lie about his day, but I didn't know why." Poirot's eyes twinkled. Watch his eyes, hear his pauses, see his hands. Ask why, find the pattern, doubt the obvious. The truth comes, Hastings. Hastings laughed. I'll try, Poirot. Try, Poirot said. And succeed. Use all the tools and the puzzle solves itself. The lesson truth is a puzzle, made of many pieces. Eyes, words, silences, movements, motives, and more. Poirot solved it by combining his skills, letting each clue light the way. You can too. Next time you sense a lie, don't focus on one thing. Watch the eyes, hear the silence, find the pattern, question the story. Fit the pieces together, and the truth will shine.